and welcome in. It is National Signing Day. So glad that you're here with us. We have got a ton to break down. The future of college football is putting pen to paper today. We got a lot of folks in the studio to break it down. First and foremost, the man, the myth, the legend alongside me, national recruiting analyst for On3, Josh Newberg. Josh, how we feeling today, man? It's Christmas. It's Christmas.
Man, almost Christmas. But it is National Signing Day. We have come a long way to get here. If you are a fan of any team, you know you've been on this roller coaster ride for a long time in today's National Signing Day. But the drama is not about to stop. We got a lot cooking today. A lot of fun on this show.
And if it's a roller coaster, you're steadily just inclining, just climbing up. Make sure you hold on tight.
Tick, 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 tick. It's
gonna be a fun
there.
ride. Gonna be a fun ride. Well, let's take a look first and foremost. Take a look at this top 10 with an On3 consensus team recruiting rankings. Josh, what are we looking at here? Set the table for the good people at home.
We got Alabama locked in at number 1. We got Georgia at number 2, just nipping at their heels. We'll see if they can catch them. Miami sitting at number 3. Ohio State at 4. Notre Dame hanging on at number 5. Texas 6. LSU 7. Oklahoma 8. You got the Gators in there at 9 and Clemson at 10. We will see a shakeup of this.
Yes.
I don't know how much. I don't know when. Maybe even during our show we're going to see some of this. The graphic that we just flashed on the screen might not be relevant by the end of the show.
The real heroes of signing day, graphics departments across the country, on call, on standby, changing rankings, sending out, signing edits, all that stuff. So making sure that we got you locked in here. If you didn't catch that graphic, if you didn't memorize those top 10 teams, no worries, because like Josh said, can guarantee you it's going to change. Josh, within that top 10, is there a team that you're watching to potentially move up, move down? What's the top 10 looking like for you in terms of mobility?
Well, we're going to see if a team can enter from outside the top 10 into the top 10. I'm watching to see if Notre Dame can hold on to Peyton Bowen. I think that's critical for them to stay not only in the top 5, but possibly in the top 10. We'll see what happens in Texas today with Texas A&M. Baylor already lost a recruit. I mean, there is drama left and right, and we're going to get right to it.
A lot of Twitter fingers out there today.
Oh, yeah.
Matt Rule letting them know he's got different feelings through emojis. I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Matt Rule woke up and chose violence this morning. Huh? How about that?
Yeah.
Letting his presence be felt, letting his, on National Signing Day already, throwing shade at the Ducks and the Canes. Awesome.
He's back at college football level.
He's back.
He is back, baby. Another individual we're so fired up to have back, an in-studio director of recruiting for On3, Chad Simmons. Chad, looking good, brother. Glad to have you in studio. How we feeling today? National Signing Day.
A lot of energy, man. I'm feeding off you and Josh, man. You guys are fired up. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I wish we had the full body shot for you because you came into the office stepping. The Jordan 3s, man, the elephant print. So you're all business today is what I'm getting.
I give the credit to Justin Timberlake, man. A concert years ago, he was wearing them on the stage. I took some pics, went home and Googled them, and ordered them myself.
Whole lot of juice. Whole lot of juice coming from that side of the studio. But, Chad, what are some of the things that you're keeping a pulse on today? What's the buzz around National Signing Day, maybe from specific guys that are still out there and going to put pen to paper at a school that is TBD?
How can we not start off with Cormani McClain? Obviously, the Twitter announcement that he is not signing, today as of right now, live on this show, looks like it will go into maybe, Thursday, Friday, a later date. Obviously still committed to Miami. There's a little bit of buzz maybe about Colorado getting involved with Cormani McClain. Could Deion, Coach Prime, do it once again? Last year, Travis Hunter from Florida State made some noise and flipped to Jackson State. We'll keep an eye on Cormani. I think guys that are still set to announce today, obviously you start at the top. Guys like Damon Wilson down to Ohio State and Georgia. You have Quay Russaw and James Smith, teammates at Carver, Montgomery, and Alabama. Do they go to Alabama? Do they go to Auburn? Could an out-of-state school like Florida or Georgia sneak in and pull those guys out? You have Mateo Ua-galele, a guy that's been linked to Ohio State, then USC, now Oregon. What happens with Mateo here in a few hours? So we've still got some big names out there. Keldrick Falk's been rumored about looking around. He's a Florida State commit. Could he go to Auburn late? He visited both schools over the weekend. So still a lot to track here on signing day.
We talked before we got on air here, the whole Cormani McClain situation is really kind of a mystery, right? The reason why he's not putting pen to paper today, kind of up in the air, it sounds like. Is there any insight you have on that, Chad, or any feel as it pertains to that situation?
You know, I've checked different sources, and it seems like there's not too much confidence as far as like Florida being back involved, even Alabama back involved. So, you know, I think just putting things together and connecting dots, it seems like Deion could be the wild card here. I think there's still some confidence. Things get worked out with Miami, and I think they still have to be considered the odds-on favorite to keep Cormani in this class. But I think Colorado is the one people are talking about the most right now.
You know, and when Cormani committed to Miami, I mean, he kind of pulled a fast one on Florida. A lot of people thought that Florida was the favorite for much of his recruitment. Florida has a pipeline to the Lakeland area down there in Florida, and in the end, he chose Miami. That was a commitment. Now, he's still committed to them. He is not decommitted. Let's not get that twisted. It's not like he's officially reopened his recruitment. He hasn't come out and said that yet, but his mom did say that she tweeted last night that the commitment signing ceremony would take place at Lakeland High School. She came on Twitter this morning and said, sorry for the confusion, but Cormani's not signing today. No other details were given on when he might sign, but as of now, it sounds like maybe Deion Sanders. Also, what about Alabama, Chad? Could Alabama be a program that is interested in Cormani McClain?
You know, it's interesting because we just started to kind of get the buzz yesterday about maybe Desmond Ricks being more linked to LSU, not Alabama, not Florida. So could Alabama make a pivot, try to come back late and give Cormani something to think about with maybe the odds of them landing Ricks not being too high when Ricks decides, you know, a day from now on Thursday evening, tomorrow, 5:30 Eastern time. So, yeah, but again, I checked with Bama sources at the time that news came out on social media about Cormani not signing today. There was not a lot of traction with Alabama at that time.
And everyone's on flip watch, it feels like today. Not everyone, but everyone who's watching National Signing Day from the outside looking in is okay. Who's finally going to put their signature down and make things official? Been no shortage of flips this cycle. I mean, you had Ruben Owens going to Texas A&M from Louisville, and you had Jaden Rashada going from Miami to Florida. And now you have, as early as this morning, Austin Novosad saying, thank you so much, Waco, but I'm going to go be a Duck. What were some of the implications? Well, Josh, we're going to start with you on some of those flips and maybe just what went into some of those flips in your mind.
There's even been more than that. Caden Proctor flips from Iowa to Alabama last night, setting the table. It's been awesome. You know, the flips are not a surprise. This has been recruiting. This is how it goes down. Anytime that you have impressionable young men listening to grown adults try to pitch them on where the best place for you to go is, you're going to have some indecisiveness. Not only that, but throw in the pressure from fans on social media, now these NIL opportunities. I mean, there's so much that goes into a decision for a young man. It's no surprise that they have some second thoughts right here at the very end.
The very end, when you got to have pen, meat, and paper. Chad, of those flips that we kind of just talked about, which of those was the most impactful in your mind, whether it be Ruben Owens, Rashada, Novosad, Proctor? I mean, do you have a pick of the litter here that you think is maybe the most impactful long-term?
You know, impactful may be Jaden Rashada to Florida, but they're in need of a quarterback to build around for the future. You know, obviously having, you know, transfer portal has changed everything as well. So those guys getting, you know, a quarterback out of the transfer portal, but for the future, building around a young quarterback that kids know, kids want to play with. We know that position is very important as far as appealing to other recruits, specifically receivers, skill guys, playmakers. But I think that one definitely stands out. As far as maybe surprises, I mean, Dante Moore happened so fast to UCLA. And I'll even say this. I mean, Ruben Owens, you mentioned, JD, about flipping to A&M. I was even more surprised he committed to Louisville in the first place. So, you know, I think him going back to Louisville, not that big of a surprise when talking flips. But, you know, when Bama can go into Iowa and pull Proctor out of his home state, you know, a big-time Iowa guy connected to that school. He has teammates at Iowa, so much pressure. But when he got on campus in Tuscaloosa, things changed. And in the end, for us, guys like me, we shouldn't be too surprised by flips. We should be prepared for flips. That's our job, is to find out the inside scoop, figure out what's going to happen next. So anything, you know, we're expecting more today, maybe within the next hour, something to go down. So let's stay tuned, man. It's going to be fun. But I think Dante Moore, probably the biggest surprise. But maybe Jaden Rashada, out of the ones you guys mentioned, maybe the most impactful.
Yeah, and I really think Anthony Hill flipping from A&M to Texas kind of shows that's the story of Texas this year. Is A&M was unable to do it on the field this year. They left the door open. Texas, who needs a big recruiting class in Sark's second year, they land the #1 linebacker in America, Anthony Hill, not only pulling him but also taking him from rival Texas A&M. That's a big get.
In-state battles continues. Going to be a lot of in-state battles, I have a feeling, as National Signing Day wears on. Folks, if you have not yet subscribed to the On3 YouTube channel, I mean, no other reason needed besides what we're doing right now. Today, live, National Signing Day. We got you covered. Keep it locked right here. Got a lot that we're going to unpack for you. Chad, when it comes to flips today, are there any that you're keeping an eye on of guys that are maybe committed and you're hoping that maybe, you're not hoping, but if you're a particular fan base, hoping that they maybe reconsider at the 11th hour?
Well, I think a couple coming up here pretty soon, starting with Peyton Bowen. Obviously, he's been long time grouped into that flip watch category. He's been a guy that's committed to Notre Dame for some time. You know, A&M's been involved, Oklahoma's been involved, Oregon's been involved. He announces, I think, within the hour, his final decision. The buzz seems to be maybe around Notre Dame hanging on, but this one's been talked about for many, many months about will Bowen stay with the Irish? Will he end up at Oregon, Oklahoma? Or A&M. I think another one to watch is DeAndre Moore, longtime Louisville commit, visited Georgia and Texas officially during the season, went back to Austin, Texas for an unofficial this past weekend. I think he'd love to play with Arch Manning. Louisville's definitely making a late push to hold on here, but he's definitely one to watch later on this afternoon. Then one more, Oregon's already flipped one this morning with Austin Novosad. I think one to watch also is Jaden Lamar, running back, Notre Dame commitment, went back to Oregon over this past weekend for an official visit. A lot of buzz around the Ducks and their chances to flip Lamar as well.
Whew, boy, the Sharks are circling those Notre Dame commitments right now. I'll tell you what, Notre Dame hanging tight, though. They are still ranked number 5, so we'll see how they finish. I like Chad saying that Peyton Bowen might stick to Notre Dame. He has been kind of wishy-washy the last 2 months. Came out and said recently that he's making a, quote, final decision today. So Peyton Bowen is committed to Notre Dame, but he will be making a final decision today.
And Josh, what goes into those kind of flips? I mean, I want to hear from Chad as well, but what goes into when a kid at the 11th hour just says, you know what, I love Baylor. My heart's been with Baylor this entire commitment or this entire recruitment. I've been committed, but you know what? Oregon's best for me. What goes into that in your mind?
Some of it just comes down to the pecking order of college football. And unfortunately, sometimes you're the shark and sometimes you're the minnow. And today was a great example of that. We saw that Dante Moore flips to UCLA, so Oregon needs to make a move. What did they do? They go get Austin Novosad, a very good quarterback, committed to Baylor for a long time, but they make the pivot and they just do what they got to do, and they fill a major need when it looks like, oh, geez, Dante Moore leaves us high and dry a week before signing day. No, we have a backup plan. We're ready to go. So these coaches have a full board of when it comes to recruiting at each position. If they are to lose somebody, they know immediately who they're going after. And guess what? They've probably been keeping that prospect warm throughout the fall just in case a moment like this comes. I don't think Oregon woke up this morning and said, hey, we need a quarterback. We better get on the phone with Austin Novosad. No, they were probably recruiting him throughout this just in case a scenario happened where Dante Moore were to move on, and he did, and they were ready to make it happen with Austin.
It was a situation of, anybody have Austin Novosad's number? Can we get him on the phone ASAP?
Right.
Somebody slide in the DMs.
Somebody go follow him on Twitter. We need a QB.
Exactly.
No, that's not how it goes. These things are very thorough. They're a long time in the making. Sometimes you'll never hear about them. Hey, if Dante Moore doesn't flip, Austin Novosad signs with Baylor today.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
You never know what's going to happen.
Only college football recruiting. Chad, in your mind, what goes into the anatomy of a flip? Kind of like Josh was saying, is it something where it spans throughout the course of several months, even dating back to last season, and then comes into this year, and it finally, maybe that one relationship pays off? Or what in your mind goes into getting these kids to flip on National Signing Day of all days?
I think, JD, everyone's different in its own way. Could it date back? Could it go into like one move like Dante Moore's move and open up that spot at Baylor? Could it be just the kids confused? I mean, obviously a commitment, like I say, is just a commitment. Nothing's final until these young men sign these letter of intents and kind of get their parents' signature there. I mean, sometimes it's a group decision. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and every kid's different. Some guys have a great support group around them. Some guys just get confused. Some guys hear the right thing and change or commit too quickly. But I think in the end, it comes down to just a straight, and nowadays, pretty much a business decision. Where do they fit the best? Who can mold and become the best player to play on Sundays down the road? I think every situation is a different situation in the end.
And Chad, I think that parlays perfectly into our next conversation. NIL. I mean, NLI is going to be a big acronym we talk about today, but NIL is something we've all had to adjust to as being a really big deal on National Signing Day. Josh, how much do you think that plays into the majority of these commitments? Is it like, hey, 80% of these guys have NIL motivations? I mean, even to the 3 stars to the 5 stars. I mean, what is the format right now when it comes to NIL in relation to National Signing Day?
Yes. I do think about 80%, the number that you said. I think about 80% of recruits are in some form or fashion thinking about NIL when it comes to their decision. Mm-hmm. Now, how many recruits are making a decision based upon NIL? I don't think as many as people think. I think that a lot of this comes down to, the relationship still, the prestige of a program, playing time, but now there's a new factor in recruiting, and without a doubt, it's NIL. You don't necessarily have to receive the check up front to say, oh, I believe in your NIL. It can be proof of concept. You can look at what programs are doing out there with their current athletes, and that is something a coach could sell to a player. Like, you don't necessarily, not everybody. I don't expect more than maybe a quarter of the roster at major Power 5 programs to be, heavily involved in NIL, but that opportunity of NIL must be there. If a player wants to go to a school and if they perform well, they want to know, am I going to have opportunities to capitalize on my name, image, and likeness?
And I think for some people, too, they get frustrated with NIL and they say, well, that's not what college sports is about. It's still an amateur sport. Like, no, it's not. And to the adults in the room, if you get a better paying job offer, 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to that job and taking the higher salary. And so if you want to fault the kids, I think you got to look more internally in yourself more so than the kid, because that's just the day and age of college football that we're in, and that is a reality when it comes to the college football landscape. Josh, when we look at NIL, sorry, you had something to say.
I want to ask Chad.
Yeah, of course.
Chad, you've covered recruiting for about 15 years. So I want to ask you, now that NIL is in full swing. Last year, some programs were participating in it, some were not. But this year, I feel like we're fully involved in the NIL process. So, to you, does it make covering the recruiting process more chaotic, or has NIL maybe solidified things because guys are inking deals?
Well, I think you said a key word there, Josh, covering. That's me covering recruiting. To me, it's very clear, more chaotic. Obviously some guys, got some deals done and locked them in pretty early. It's very simple. Other guys I know personally have flipped at the very last minute, whether it be commitments or signing day or whatnot, because other offers were up and that changed from one school to the other. They changed their mind. They were committed to one, flipped to another. So I think for me in my world, in my position at On3, I think it's definitely more chaotic trying to keep up with not just who has the best relationships, where a kid maybe feels he fits in best offensively or defensively, or the best chance to play early somewhere or win a championship. Now you factor in the NIL and figure out how much it impacts each individual. I think it's like reading the room. Some it means more to than the others. You got to figure out which one is most important to. But for me in general, it's become, I think, much more chaotic trying to track this and do my job to figure out where these young men are going in the end, because NIL changes everything by the minute.
And Chad, the same question I asked Josh, how much are you hearing about NIL in a lot of these high-profile kids' recruitment?
I think you have to have a plan in place. It's like Josh said, not necessarily always up front. Now, I think some are bigger than others on that. Again, I think it goes back to kind of reading the room. I say that because I spoke to a dad this week of a very high-profile recruit that talked about this one coach did a great job reading the room with my family, understanding what we were looking for from an NIL perspective, from the pitch being genuine. And I think you have to understand who you're talking to, what it means to that parent, that young man, how important, some more than others. So I think it differs between one kid to the next. One thing we've seen pretty consistently. It means a lot, it seems like, to those quarterbacks right now.
Which makes sense. I mean, and also to your point with reading the room, you don't want to walk into a 5-star quarterback living room and say, hey, we'll give you in some low figure and just totally, blow up the recruitment from the beginning of saying this is how much we think you're worth and then not be able to catch
they might
you
not
like
even
that.
keep you around until dinner time.
Right.
Mom might kick you right out of the house.
You got to eat because the next kid's house is 30 minutes away, and that's a long time to wait for a meal. Josh, who do you think has done NIL well so far with the early part of this whole operation being, 2 years old? Who's done NIL well in your mind?
I talked to On3 NIL writer Pete Nakos yesterday, and one of the programs that he brought up to me was the Miami Hurricanes. And I think that if you look right now at what's happening, the NIL is the great equalizer for the Miami Hurricanes. Mario Cristobal comes in year one. The Canes don't even make the bowl. They're not playing in a bowl game.
Yeah.
They're 5-7. It looks like the program is headed in the same direction it's been headed in for a while, but NIL has kind of leveled the playing field. Miami's sitting at number 3 in the On3 team rankings right now.
Yeah.
I don't think without NIL, I don't think there's any possibility that they could get up to the number 3 class, but they've proven that the NIL opportunities down in South Beach are there. Mario Cristobal and John Ruiz, hand-in-hand tag team partners in 2023, doing a heck of a job bringing in a ton of talent to Miami, especially in the trenches. I love what Miami's done, and I think a big credit goes to NIL.
And it shows, just like you said, in the On3 consensus team recruiting rankings, Miami currently the number 3 class. Now, that could change in a matter of minutes depending on what's going on with these different papers getting signed and Cormani McClain potentially impacting that as well.
Hey,
so we'll keep an eye on that.
You got to close those deals, JD. You got to close them.
Got to put pen to paper. It's like the NFL draft, but everybody has a chance to get your pick until pen meets paper. Going to be checking in with Chad Simmons again periodically throughout the entire show, so make sure you don't go anywhere. He's got the scoop. Got the inside scoop on the desk. Got Chad Simmons, Director of Recruiting for On3. The duration of the show, like I mentioned, you're going to want to make sure you're locked in, going to want to make sure you're subscribed, so make sure you do that. Now, we're racing for the number 1 class.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's still the February signing period, but early signing day has kind of become what is the real signing day, if that makes sense, or the most impactful signing day, rather. What are kind of the swing recruits you're keeping an eye on today that could impact those final rankings?
Quay Rousseau, James Smith, the Montgomery duo, they're going to make their decision here around 1 p.m., I believe. Yeah, 1 p.m. they're going to make their decision. We also have Damon Wilson coming up. He's going to possibly commit to Georgia. There's a couple 5-stars out there that could kind of shape how this 2023 signing day closes. Alabama, though, the class that they have put together, whether it be in the trenches, the secondary, Justice Haynes, their 5-star running back commitment. Alabama, just when people started counting out Nick Saban, JD, just when they started thinking the old man had lost a step, I don't even want to call him an old man, the gentleman had lost a step, Nick Saban goes out and signs a class, even in Bama standards, for the ages.
Bama go to Bama. That's
Yeah.
what Chad always says.
Hey.
Bama is going to Bama.
And I think a great example of that was what we saw last night in Caden Proctor flipping. He's the number 1 prospect in the state of Iowa. He's committed to Iowa. He's the number 3 ranked offensive tackle in America, 5-star, all American, you name it. He flips to Alabama. Now, I know on paper I talked about pecking order and all that, but Iowa as an offensive tackle is a little bit different. You can do everything you want to do as a player at Iowa if you're there. We've seen them churn out numerous number 1 draft picks on the offensive line. He's also an in-state kid, but in the end, Nick Saban's pitch is just too hard to say no to.
And it's consistent. Every single year we see those programs that stack the trenches on the offensive and the defensive side, whether it's Georgia, whether it's Alabama. Heck, Michigan's made a killing at it lately, not so much on the recruiting trail, but developing to an elite level. We'll talk about that. The teams that play big-time games in December and January, they're thick in the trenches. They crush it every single year, in Alabama, Georgia, no exception. But some big-time trench players that are out there right now, Mateo Ua-galele, Damon Wilson. Heck, Nicholas Harbor, depending on how you talk about him, he's going to sign
He
in
might be an edge rusher, yeah.
He could be a receiver, he could be a tight end, edge rusher. You're going to talk about that for sure. Another place we got to look when we're talking about the future of these programs, some of the top quarterbacks.
Oh, boy.
Some of the top quarterbacks.
That's where the drama comes from, too.
It's where the drama, it's where a lot of the NIL money goes, too. And there's a lot of them that are already committed. You got Arch going to Texas, or committed. He's signed. Malachi Nelson at USC, Jackson Arnold signed, Dante Moore, Nico Iamaliava, Chris Vazina, Jaden Rashada, Eli Holstein. We could go down the list here. But why is the quarterback position, in your mind, Josh, so crucial to the anatomy of putting together an all-star signing class?
Man, on a day when we're talking signing day, right, it's all about talent acquisition. It's all about improving your roster. Well, in this day and age of college football, with the rules the way they are, with the ability to impact the game from the quarterback position, there is no more important position on the field for you. So I think this is why we see such an emphasis, because you can flip a roster, you can infuse talent almost immediately if you get the right quarterback.
Yeah, Bill Pulley and you and I were at the Personnel Symposium in Nashville not too long ago, and he went up there and talked about like what you got to look for at different positions, like receiver and edge rusher, and then at the end of it he goes, you can solve about 60% of your problems, get the right quarterback. We had a pretty good quarterback in Peyton Manning when I was in Indianapolis, so it worked out. It was like, yeah, you can drop the mic on that right there. Of this group, who should we be talking about that we aren't talking about right now? Like, who's the guy that you're keeping an eye on that's not the Arch or the Nico or Dante Moore?
I do like Chad referencing Jaden Rashada. I think with the drama there of Jaden Rashada committing to Miami, being a California quarterback, going across the country to commit to Miami, then flipping to Florida at the last minute. Florida loses Anthony Richardson. You know, Rashada could be in a position where he might see the field as a freshman. Obviously, you know, there's other guys that we think could see the field as a freshman. Dante Moore, Nico Maliava. There's others, but I also like Lincoln Kienholz. Yeah, I like Lincoln Kienholz a lot. He flipped from Washington to Ohio State, and you know, Ohio State doesn't have exactly a clear path to early playing time, but Lincoln wants to get in there and compete. I think there's something to that about somebody that is going to competition. So much on signing day, we hear about players going to a school where they can play right away or step in and play. He's not taking the easy road to get to the starting position. I really like Lincoln Kienholz. There's a lot of great signal callers in this class. You know, some of them are already on campus. It's unbelievable that there's being committed, there's being signed, and then there's Nico Maliava, who is actually at bowl practice throwing passes to the Tennessee Volunteer players.
Already got the number 8 jersey on and on contact.
You can't flip at that point, right? Yeah. Like, you can't flip.
I think it's safe to say he's off flip watch. For the foreseeable future, he is not on flip watch, is Nico Maliava. Lincoln Kienholz, though, they were showing highlights just a second ago. Dude can sling it.
Absolutely.
And the moxie to want to go play at a place like Ohio State that, like you said, has so much competition. It's routinely a stacked quarterback room. It's just kind of the way that Ohio State does things and the kind of caliber of players that Ryan Day recruits to play quarterback in that offense. And you see routinely players that are the quarterback at Ohio State have enormous success and go make a lot of money in the NFL. And so I think what you said was interesting about Lincoln Kienholz wanting to run towards competition, because I don't think it gets talked about enough with the quarterback position at the high school level. We're caught up in the tools and the stats and the accolades, but really a lot of the quarterback position is played from the neck up and having that mental makeup to allow you to be successful. So Lincoln Kienholz, like you said, running towards competition, I think as well is really going to be impactful.
JD, we're looking at the top 10 quarterbacks here. Every single one of them feels like he could play as a freshman. But why is it that we see very few quarterbacks actually have success, start or even find success as a freshman?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. I think a lot of it has to do with the speed of the game because, and this is not to knock any of these phenomenal signal callers, but the reality is when you line up for your first snap as the starting quarterback at Texas, that defense across from you, I don't care what program it is, all those guys on that side of the ball have gotten scholarships to go play defense and go knock your head off. Like, they got recruited too. They did a lot of stuff. They all
want to play as freshmen too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think the speed of the game and just also the complexity of the offense. It's not going to be a 10 to 15 play playbook anymore. It's going to be upwards of 30 to 40 with different checks, different responsibilities. So I think there's so much that you're responsible for as a quarterback, and then upping the level of competition and the speed of the play. I think that's why we see the redshirt be such a beneficial thing for some of these guys.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see these guys. You know, we've been watching them for the full year. We've been ranking them. We've been moving them around. But at the end of the day, when you can't really go wrong signing one of these top 10 quarterbacks. I mean, obviously, they're not all going to find success. There's a lot of variables, like you just said. But on paper, you watch their highlights, absolutely every single one of these guys looks like they have the ability to make an impact at the college football level.
And I think the thing that's interesting, too, is we have so much more access to these guys, too. We see him in the camp circuit. We see him on 7-on-7. We see him at the Elite 11. We get to see their 3-game highlight tape. And I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Nationally televised games. And so I think you get so much more data on these kids to where the margin for error gets limited a little bit more. But one guy that a lot of folks are talking about as a can't-miss prospect, Arch, last name Manning.
Woo.
And he is a pulverizing prospect, to say the least. No fault of his own, just was born into it. Why is he so pulverizing?
Oh, man.
Josh?
You know, I think it comes down, it's his last name,
Yep.
right? So there's a lot of interest in Arch Manning, even though he's not necessarily going to expected to go into Texas and start next year. There's just so much intrigue because he crosses over, right? Texas, there's no Mannings have ever been to Texas.
Yeah.
But the Mannings have been all over the SEC. So if you're a Tennessee fan, if you're an Ole Miss fan, you kind of keep an eye out to see what Arch Manning's going to do. There's a lot of interest. Also, when there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of haters.
Yep.
So there's a lot of people discounting what Arch Manning did, the records that he broke, the things that he did on the football field. You know, they knock him for running too much. They knock him for throwing too much. They knock him for his competition. But at the end of the day, Arch did what you're supposed to do, and that's whatever's across the field from you, go out and dominate.
Yeah.
And he did not just for 1 year, but he broke all the records. And Arch Manning is going to go into Texas with a lot of expectations, but here's a young man who's grown up with expectations, right? He's grown up with the last name Manning. He's handled himself excellent. I think that he's going to fit in very well at Texas. I doubt. Do you think he plays his first year? I think he probably needs a year to get acclimated, but that could be good for him.
Yeah, the rumblings are, and I think Vince Young actually came out and said it on some different national show, just said the plan is for Arch Manning to redshirt, get a year under his belt.
Sounds good.
The strength, department, be able to digest the system offensively. And I think so much of this is interesting because he had offers from Kirby Smart. He had offers from Alabama, Nick Saban. Like, he could have gone and played at those kind of programs.
Florida recruited him very hard.
Exactly, but he chose to go with the quarterback whisperer and Steve Sarkisian. And so that just tells me so much of what Arch Manning is wanting to do is develop for the NFL, which I don't think is a secret. I don't think that's novel analysis, but people forget there was a whole camp around Arch Manning. It wasn't just an 18-year-old saying, you know what, I like Austin. I had a good visit there. I think I want to go to Austin. Like, there was a lot of people with a lot of insight into the football world that, kind of navigated him along with his decision, I'm sure, towards Texas.
When we talked about what goes into a decision, this wasn't an emotional decision.
Yes.
This wasn't an NIL deal that got Arch Manning to Texas. I mean, this was, like you said, people around him, including Arch, making an informed decision based on visits, based on what they saw on the football field, based on what they know about the coaching systems. And, I think that he made the best decision for himself. I think Texas makes a lot of sense, and I'm really excited to see what he does there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to backtrack just a little bit to something you said earlier. The last name and people having opinions on him, right? Arch isn't that good. Arch is that good. He's the next great thing. He's
Everybody has an opinion.
Nobody's indifferent on Arch Manning. And, that's fine. This whole thing's going to play itself out in the wash. He's going to go play a lot of college football, whether at Texas or, who knows, the transfer portal.
Right.
We're not going to get to that. That's a whole other conversation.
Today's signing day.
Exactly. We're staying on course with Arch Manning playing at Texas. But the thought process around how he handled his recruitment didn't go to really any camps outside of the camps on the college circuit. What's your opinion on that? Is that a positive thing? Is that something that you think we're going to see more of with future recruits?
He handled it like a pro because really you can't win. Because if you go out and you're Arch Manning and you smoke it on the 7-on-7 circuit, they say, well, that's shorts and T-shirts and that's not real routes. So Arch Manning, I think in today's day, I think he did the right thing without playing 7-on-7 because 7-on-7 has become some sort of a circus out there. And putting Arch Manning out there is just putting a target on your back because Arch is out there as one of the top players in America. Mind you, you roll into some of these 7-on-7 teams, and they'll have players on the other side talking crap to you that don't even start on their high school team.
Yeah.
So I don't think Arch needed to put himself through that. Of course, he got knocked for not doing it, but he would have gotten knocked for doing it.
Yeah.
So I think he was in a no-win situation, but he's a true pro. I mean, I know he's only heading into college, but he is a pro's pro already.
And the 7-on-7 thing, which you and I both love, I think there is a lot of benefit to that, but to kind of riff on your point of it could have also been something that people just use as ammo to knock Arch down. Like 7-on-7 to me in some ways is kind of like the AAU of high school football in the sense that it gets, the Instagramification and the hyper social media, doctoring of it. Like if Arch Manning throws one interception on a 7-on-7 play that gets caught on film, it's, oh man, Arch isn't that good. Season 7-on-7 can't even deliver this route, that route. So I'm with you. I think there's a lot more to it. I don't know if we see it in the future with other guys, but just with Arch Manning, handling like a pro. You're absolutely right.
I think because you saw what happened. Like when he went on visits to Texas, it was a full circus surrounding him. Like the cameras, the fans, everybody making signs. And I just think going on the 7-on-7 circuit isn't something he needed to put himself through.
Absolutely. Riffing on that, other big names, Nico Iamaleava, Jackson Arnold, Dante Moore. Of that group, is there someone that you would kind of lean towards as being maybe the leader when this whole thing is said and done? We're looking back at their college football career, someone that you're high on maybe?
They're all of them,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Specifically, give me Nico. I want to see what happens with Nico Iamaleava. I think he walks into a situation where Tennessee is just ready to go, right? Tennessee felt like they were ready for liftoff this year. They did really well on the football field. We'll see what happens with him and Joe Milton. How do you feel about the situation? And normally, it's not even an early enrollee. We're talking about he's already in bowl practice.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think him being there for bowl practice is phenomenal. And you and I talked about it actually on an earlier live show. So much your freshman year is just getting acclimated to college life. Like you're now in a however many square foot dorm, or maybe in their case an apartment, but still your living situation's changed, your meal plan's changed, your schedule has changed. Going from California to Tennessee might as well be like going from California to Mars. Like it's that different.
Yes.
And so for Nico to be able to kind of exhale and have all that happen during bowl prep, before spring ball, before fall camp, I think that's really going to benefit him well. And also be able to physically develop for the winter period of conditioning and kind of get some of that strength from the college level, I think is going to be really, really impactful in him potentially playing soon.
And I also do think Jackson Arnold and Dante Moore are both going to make impacts early as well. So I don't want to say that one over the other, but I think all three are going to make early impacts, and that's why they were recruited this heavily.
Yeah, I mean, Jackson Arnold going into a situation at Oklahoma where it looks like Dylan Gabriel might be playing another year in Norman, but Jackson Arnold, I mean, you see it here. The dude's got some tools. I mean,
and he's
showing off
built.
The wheels there.
He's got the measurables. I mean, we're not looking at a stick figure here at 185 pounds. He's got some meat on his bones, and he can sling it. He can run the football. I think he's a great fit at Oklahoma, and I think he is going to put up some monster numbers during his career.
Number 3 quarterback according to the On3 player rankings. Played a pretty good level of football, too, over there in Denton.
Yeah.
That's big boy football in the state of Texas. So no question, well, how legit are those numbers? I promise you, all that is very much a real deal when you're looking at Jackson Arnold. Let's shift gears to a program that Jackson Arnold likely is going to play against a fair amount during his college career. Let's get into some of these bigger brands. Texas. The Texas Longhorns have made a whole lot of noise so far on the recruiting trail. Currently, as of this morning, the number 6 class in the country. I'm sure that'll change here in the next however many hours.
Yeah, they've been floating around 5 or 6. So they're borderline top 5. Got word today that Derek Williams, the safety, is going to sign with Texas. He's an immediate impact type player. Texas signed Anthony Hill, number 1 linebacker in America. They signed Arch Manning, 5-star quarterback. They signed the number 1 running back in America, Cedric Baxter. I mean, Texas has some pieces that are ready to go. Jonte Cook is a great, exciting wide receiver. Texas's class is amazing, to be honest with you. I mean, this was not what I necessarily expected about a year ago this time, but they put in the work. Texas A&M struggling on the football field definitely opened the door for Texas to land Anthony Hill. I think that was a huge addition. And, hey, Texas A&M has really owned recruiting in the state for the last couple of years. Oh, Chad we might have to break this. We got a little Simmons scoop. Let's go to Chad Simmons.
Oh, we got news, obviously, I think a big one for Florida fans for sure. Andy Jean stays with the University of Florida. Florida with Florida State, visited there this past weekend, was there late in November. There was some concern, I can confirm that, in Gainesville about the ability to hang on and keep him away from Florida State. But we have confirmed Jean has signed with the University of Florida. Big news for Napier and company there at the Swamp.
A big-time prospect out of Miami Northwestern. Andy Jean had went to the Florida State-Florida game in Tallahassee at the end of November, and then last weekend, right before the dead period, takes an official visit to FSU. Had people buzzing, but in the end, Chad has it. Andy Jean sticks with Florida, another big addition. I really like what they're doing at the wide receiver position in Gainesville. They signed Eugene Wilson, who I think is one of the most underrated players in America. And a big addition, adding Andy Jean and keeping him from flipping to one of your rivals. Always big on signing day.
I mean, the state of Florida, recruiting-wise, is just madness from a talent standpoint from those three schools just going at each other's neck all year long. Oh, by the way, UCF's going to have some Power 5 brand power here in the very near future. Chad, if I could pick your brain on this really quick, how big of a win is this for Florida, being able to fend off another in-state program after kind of going back and forth with Miami, able to keep Florida State off the trail? How big is this for the Gators?
It's a big win anytime. Obviously, 4-star receiver, great program. You want to create roots to at Miami Northwestern in South Florida, JD. But obviously, Florida's had their battles with Miami. They've won. Jaden Rashada, they've lost a few they probably want to talk about right now. And then they lost Isaiah Nixon this morning to UCF. So there's been some losses for Florida for them to kind of respond and kind of hold on here. I think is big, but keep an eye on Florida State still. I think going back to them, they lost this one, but keep an eye with Edwin Joseph announcing here pretty soon between Florida State, Penn State, Miami. I like Florida State for Edwin Joseph, and also Conrad Hussey, a guy I think that's committed to Penn State, also to be trending towards flipping to Florida State as well. So maybe they lost this battle in Tallahassee, but they could win some later on today.
Nothing like signing day.
Yeah,
the madness continues.
And you love the in-state battles, right? Yep. You see Cormani McClain putting things on hold. As soon as he put things on hold, all Florida fans perk up. Hey, maybe this opens the door for us. And maybe it does. And that's what happens with these in-state battles. You love to see it, especially in the state of Florida. There have been some classics that go down to the wire, and it looks like we're not done seeing the drama play out in the Sunshine State today.
Whole lot of drama. Chad, appreciate you keeping us locked in here. If you have anything else, we will obviously throw it right back to you. But that's the kind of content you got here on the On3 YouTube channel. We're keeping you covered for National Signing Day. When Chad Simmons has some intel, I promise you will be the first to know. We'll throw it back over to him. But a school that we were talking about a second ago that Florida's going to have to play a lot here in the very near future, the Texas Longhorns head into the SEC here pretty soon for Texas. How impactful is this class with them potentially, or not potentially, they are heading to the SEC soon. Does this mean a little bit more? Is more important than previous classes maybe?
They're going to make a major impact. And let me rewind something I said on Cedric Baxter. He is not exactly signed yet. I said he's signed. He's committed. The official LOI has not come in. Texas has not announced him yet. But once they do, I think he's one of those pieces that makes a major impact. We're expecting that later on today. What else? But Texas is just, they're really coming alive at the skill position and in the trenches. Yeah. Flipping Colton Vasek from their rival, Oklahoma, that was huge. He's an edge rusher. He stands up, maybe a linebacker, we'll see. But what Texas has done on the recruiting trail is pretty fascinating. But I want to ask you, what does this do for Steve Sarkisian in his third year, heading into his third year? You ink a class like this that has Arch Manning. Some people say signing Arch Manning gives him a little bit of security because he gets to develop him. But does it?
I think it has to. I mean, I think the thing that people need to make sure they remember in this whole recruiting conversation is people commit to people. Like Arch Manning, I'm sure he loved Austin. I'm sure he loved Texas. I'm sure he was all about the burnt orange. But the reality is, if Steve Sarkisian is not your head coach for the Texas Longhorns, Arch Manning is not committing to Texas.
Good point.
That's just kind of the way this whole thing works. It was a business decision for him, and that's the thing that a lot of these offensive skill players are deciding on is business decisions and want to play in that Steve Sarkisian kind of offense. So I think the whole conversation around does it buy him more time is fair, but for Steve Sarkisian, he's recruiting his tail off, and it's paying dividends. One other thing that's interesting, a lot of these guys that Texas landed, from Arch Manning, Jonte Cook, they committed after a 5-7 season.
Right.
Like Texas had success on the field this year, 8 wins, not what you signed up for at Texas. They expect better, but a positive trend. These guys were saying, hey, we're down to come to Austin after you miss a bowl game. So there's clearly some faith in the vision that's being sold with Steve Sarkisian and company down there.
Yeah, and they get to compete in the SEC during their career. So I think that was a major selling point heading in. There's a lot of transition that's happening at Texas, and I think that Sark picked up on that, and he really pulled in a great class to take with him to the SEC.
And that's interesting you say that. How much of a selling point is that for these high school kids getting to go play an NFL junior in the SEC?
It's huge.
Is it exposure?
It's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at Cedric Baxter, right? If you want to go into the state of Florida now, you have the selling point of, hey, we're going to be playing in this state pretty soon. We're going to be playing games where anybody in the state of Florida can watch us play on TV. They can go to the Gainesville. They can go to Georgia. We're going to be in and around the South a whole lot more in the future if you come sign with Texas.
Is this a class that you expect could contribute sooner rather than later? Maybe some of these guys playing a little bit earlier?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, I think Derek Williams, I think Cedric Baxter, I think Jonte Cook, I think Colton Vasek could even see the field early. And maybe we see an Arch Manning. I don't want to put that type of pressure on him yet. But I think a lot of this class will play early. Yeah,
the thing
I
is,
do.
too, the moment Quinn Ewers throws 2 interceptions in a football game.
Oh, boy.
The student section will start to come alive. We want Arch.
If Quinn throws an interception in the spring game, they might start saying that. I mean, yeah, it's going to be an interesting dynamic between those two. But hey, Sark's dealt with some high-profile quarterbacks in his time, so I'm sure he'll be able to work this out.
Yeah, I mean, the lights are big and bright in Texas. What you sign up for in the Lone Star State, what you sign up for when you commit to one of the biggest brands, not just in college football, but how about all of sports in the Texas Longhorns? Folks, if you have not yet subscribed to the On3 YouTube channel, now is the time. We want you here. We got Chad Simmons in the studio, got Josh Newberg laying it down for us here, talking everything recruiting on National Signing Day. This is your home for all things college sports 12 months out of the year. Make sure you're locked in with us. Josh, another big brand, making some noise. Made some noise this year, was a game away from making the college football playoff. Arguably a Caleb Williams hamstring away from making the college football playoff. USC, at last check, the number 12 class in the On3 consensus team recruiting rankings. They're building a little bit more, it seems like, from the high school level. Leaned on the portal a lot when Lincoln Riley first got there. What are your thoughts on this class and what they've done so far?
Well, you love Malachi Nelson. It starts and stops with the quarterback. Big-time arm, big-time player. I think he's going to fit well in Lincoln Riley's offense. Zachariah Branch and Mekhi Lemon both have a chance to start early. I really love the grittiness of Tackett Curtis. I mean, if you've seen him play, he is aggressive. He is a heart. He's kind of a throwback type player, and I think that's something USC needs right now. You know, they're kind of here with this reset with Lincoln Riley. What do you think about Malachi Nelson and his ability to fit into a Lincoln Riley offense?
Well, I mean, I think for Malachi Nelson, business decision as well for all of these kids. I mean, you've seen it, Heisman Trophy after Heisman Trophy after Heisman Trophy, most recently Caleb Williams, 3 Heisman Trophies for the quarterback under Lincoln Riley. Malachi Nelson's like, yeah, I'll go play in that offense.
Right.
Yeah, I'll go get some hardware for myself. So I think you're seeing the success of these offenses playing a factor, obviously, at the high school level, getting big-time guys like Malachi Nelson. And so I'm just curious to see how he gets utilized early, because now you get 4 games to play before you lose your red shirt. If USC has some success early, do we, early in the season, that is, rather, and have some big leads, do we see some Malachi Nelson
I
in
definitely
there?
think
You'd
so.
hope so, right?
I think so. I think he has the ability. I mean, he has the tools. He has the size. He has everything that it takes to go into the Pac-12 and make an impact. I don't know if he burns his red shirt next year. I mean, barring an injury, but I think that he has a huge future ahead of him in LA.
And Lincoln Riley just continues to stack up quarterbacks. I mean, he's the quarterback whisperer. I don't think there's an argument about it. And they're heading to the Big Ten here pretty soon.
Can you blame him?
I mean, yeah, you can't blame Malachi Nelson for wanting to play for Lincoln Riley. Heck, if I was a quarterback, I'd be knocking on Lincoln Riley's door day and night saying, I will walk on. Just let me play in this offense. But they're heading to the Big Ten here pretty soon.
Yeah.
And you think of the Big Ten, you think of trenches, you think of cold, ugly games where it's 4 yards and a cloud of snow kicking up around the field. I mean, for USC, that wasn't necessarily a strong point for them previously this year. They're going to build through that. What is your thoughts on USC in terms of this class as they make that move to the Big Ten here very soon?
They got to toughen up. They got to do a little bit better in the trenches. Now, they sign Elijah Page, who I like a lot, 3-star offensive tackle, but he is a monster at 6'6.5", 310 pounds. They also need to get a little tougher, right? Like, the finesse of the Pac-12 is not going to play the same in the Big Ten. There's going to be games where it's cold. There's going to be games where it's wet. You're not going to be slinging the ball all around the park like another day in 75 sunny LA, Yeah. So I think that bringing in some of these big, ugly trench monsters is going to help them out when they make that transition to the Big Ten.
You need it. And you need to take some pressure off Malachi Nelson, too. I mean, I don't think there's too much of a question as to if they got their guy at quarterback, but now you got to build the pieces around him. Got to build the interior. Lincoln Riley's doing a very good job of doing that. Just going to take some time. Needs to happen, obviously, at the high school level. I'm sure they'll hit the portal, too. But so far for the Trojans, nipping around a top 10 class. Do you think there's a chance they could jump into that top 10 when this whole thing's said and done? I know Deuce Robinson's still out there.
Yeah, Deuce Robinson's still out there. He's going to make his decision in February. He's the number 1 tight end in America, 5-star out of the state of Arizona. And today, Mateo Ua-galele, 5-star edge, is going to make his decision. Now, Chad, can we come to you on some Mateo Ua-galele scoop? I know that heading into the week, it was Ohio State. They were trending. Then it was USC. They were trending. But as of this morning, what are you hearing on 5-star defensive lineman Mateo Ua-galele?
Yeah, like you said, Josh, for much of the fall, it looked to be Ohio State's to lose. I mean, he had that connection, and obviously the resume of Larry Johnson speaks for itself, and he was looking at going to the Midwest, to Columbus. Obviously, USC got the last and final in-home visit over the weekend on Sunday. And really over the last couple of weeks, quietly, there was some momentum building around the local program in Los Angeles. We knew Oregon was not going away. Lanning was involved. They had multiple in-home visits. Tosh Lupoi is very much involved as well for Oregon. And this one shifted pretty late on signing day eve towards Oregon. And based on everything I'm hearing this morning, I like where Oregon's at to land his signature later on today. This would be a huge win for Lanning Lupoi, that program at Oregon, to beat out and hold off the local program at USC. Everybody I've talked to the last 24 to 48 hours said it's coming down to Oregon and USC. Ohio State quickly faded, but right now I like where Oregon's at for Mateo.
Man, you know, and this is going to shift a little bit of power because it seemed like Ohio State was trending for some of these guys. You know, Damon Wilson, a 5-star edge, seemed like they were going to pull him out of Venice, Florida, but now maybe he's heading to Georgia. Mateo Ua-galele to Oregon. You got two programs on signing day. One, Oregon is making major moves, and Ohio State. Now, I'm not dissing Ohio State's class. They have a phenomenal class. But as of today on signing day, a bit of a fizzle.
Bit of a fizzle, but I mean, there's still a lot of time left. Chad, you had something else you wanted to get to in terms of, you know, the scoop. So I want to make sure we throw it to you, brother. What's the latest?
Yeah, at the beginning of the show, JD, you referenced like Matt Rule talking about a little bit of Twitter fun there. He just landed a home run this morning, landed Malachi Coleman back in this class. Coleman lives like, 10, 15 minutes from the Lincoln campus in Nebraska. He's a hometown kid. There was a little bit of quick buzz around Colorado after the OV over the weekend. They became a threat. He canceled a trip to Michigan late to go to Colorado, hang out with Coach Prime. Matt Rule held off Coach Prime to win this one and keep the local talent who could play anywhere from receiver, outside linebacker, maybe a big safety, to something like a defensive end. I think the ceiling is high for Malachi Coleman, and it's a huge kind of statement, I think, win for Matt Rule at Nebraska.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think this had potential to be Deion Sanders' statement on signing day. Malachi Coleman took a last-minute official visit out to Boulder. I know that Colorado had not been heavily in his recruitment before, but the impact of Coach Prime getting out there got him on campus, and I really thought that this was going to be his chance to make big waves on signing day. Doesn't do it. Matt Rule does. Matt Rule comes out tweeting, and he gets his big man, Malachi Coleman. What a pickup.
Twitter fingers and then backing it up with the Malachi Coleman commitment. Chad, what does this say about Nebraska as a program? Because usually when recruits go and hang out with Coach Prime for a minute, you don't see them again. Like, they're signed, sealed, delivered, they're going to Boulder. What does it say about Matt Rule, Nebraska, and where they're at currently?
You know, I think it just says a lot about him keeping the hometown kid home. I mean, obviously, he grew up a Nebraska guy. He was a one-time Nebraska commit with Mickey Joseph in the lead there in Lincoln. And, you know, Matt Rule, one of his first stops was Malachi Coleman's house. Right after that, Coleman goes back on campus that weekend for an unofficial to hang out with Rule and that new staff as it was being assembled. And it shows a lot about Rule. One, not only the kid, but the family. The mom was heavily involved. Rule did a great job connecting with not just Malachi, but his circle to keep them home, which I think is a huge, again, statement win for the beginning of things. I think things get started for Matt Rule at Nebraska. Starting
to heat up there in Nebraska. I'm sure it's freezing cold in December in Lincoln, Nebraska, but it's starting to heat up on the recruiting trail a little bit.
But Malachi's from there, so, you know, hey, he's from Nebraska. He gets it. It's not too cold for him.
Keeping the hometown kid home. A big get from Matt Rule and company. Like you said, backing up with Twitter fingers. Very, very big deal. How about Tennessee?
How about
a program that's just been on a tear as of this year. I mean, Josh Heupel and the excitement around Hendon Hooker and their offense and just the program they're starting to build. Number 15 class a season ago. Right now, flirting with the top 5. Number 6 as of this morning. Top 10 class, number 11 as of this morning. But I mean, hey, could they make a jump into that, top half of the top 10? Maybe not top 5, but maybe somewhere in that 6 or 7 range, Josh?
If they don't pull out a shocker today, I think they finish just outside the top 10.
Okay.
I don't know if they have enough left on the board to put them inside the top 10, but as where they sit now, with those 2 top commitments, Nico Amaliava and David Hobbs. David Hobbs is a 5-star prospect. He's the number 5 ranked defensive lineman in America, and he is going to come in and cause all sorts of problems for opposing quarterbacks, along with Caleb Herring. And Arion Carter is one of the greatest stories that we've told on this show throughout the fall. Mm-hmm. Chad Simmons did a great job of following Arion Carter's recruitment through and through. He was a Memphis commit as of September. He was committed to the Memphis Tigers. All of a sudden, Alabama, USC, Miami, LSU, the list goes on. All the offers just start rolling in. Chad, I want to talk to you about Arion Carter and what it was like covering his recruitment. You were there after he picked up the big offer from USC. Miami came in. Tennessee eventually gets involved, but what was it like talking to a prospect like Arion Carter, where he puts out a 3-game highlight and just receives a ton of interest in the middle of September, his senior year?
Yeah, I mean, let me just give him a little bit of praise as a person, not just a football player, Josh. I mean, the way he handled all of this, as humble as he was, you never would have known he was an All-American all of a sudden, that he had Nick Saban calling his phone, that he was a wanted man by Josh Heupel in the University of Tennessee. Auburn, Michigan, Ohio State, many others were coming after him all of a sudden. You never would have known. He didn't change. He put the work in. He played running back for his team. He played linebacker for his team. He did his due diligence, did his homework, and he found Tennessee being the place he felt the best that fit him. And, he's just a great kid, great story. We're seeing another one just like that in Tyler Scott, an Atlanta Metro kid who blew up the second half of the season, one-time Arkansas State commit. He'll announce his decision in San Antonio on January 7th. But Arion Carter, not just a great football player for Tennessee, but he'll make that locker room and those guys around him better in Knoxville as well. Yeah,
really incredible story to follow throughout the fall. Thanks for covering all that, Chad. Tennessee sits at 11, JD. Mm-hmm. They made a run at the number 1 spot in America this year on the football field in the rankings. Do you see this, along with the incoming recruiting class, do you think that Tennessee can sustain this run, or was this more of a flash in the pan?
I think with what Josh Heupel's building, it really feels like this is kind of going to be the new Tennessee. I mean, what I pay attention to with coaches, especially from the press conference standpoint, a lot of it's coach speak. Yeah, that's fair, but I think there is something to be gleaned as to their philosophy. And all the great coaches, the Kirby Smarts, the Nick Sabans, I mean, we're starting to see more of Mike Norvell talking like this. Jim Harbaugh talks like this, talking about the internal and not being worried about the result. They're happy with the results. They're happy with winning, but they're worried about playing their best on that best day and not getting too caught up with the external. And I think to see Tennessee kind of shift towards that in just year 2 under Josh Heupel, I'll just say this, you're not supposed to make the jump that they made from year 1 to year 2 with a new coach like that. Like, you're not supposed to go from 7 wins to double-digit wins. It doesn't happen like that. And so for Tennessee to have the success on the field, now having some of the success on the recruiting trail to back it up, I think Tennessee is going to be a program to be dealt with in the SEC for a long time.
And it seems that Josh Heupel has made a name for himself at Tennessee. Yeah. I know he comes from UCF, goes to the SEC, makes an imprint right away with his offense. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's already being known to offensive recruits and now defensive, but especially offensive recruits, that you want to play in Josh Heupel's system.
100%. 100%. If you want to go catch touchdowns and you want to go flash and play at the biggest level, the biggest stage with the most exposure at the highest level, you come and play in that offense. And I think a lot of us think about Tennessee and we think of the receiver position and the deep bombs from Hooker to Hyatt, and that's definitely a factor in the offense, but also they run the football pretty effectively as well. I mean, they were right around 6 yards a carry this year on the ground, ran the ball at one point almost 55% of the time. So they were a run-first football team for the better part of this year. So I say that to just say, yes, receivers are going to want to come play, but you're going to have a lot of those big boys up front that want to go move some other big human beings against their will down there in Knoxville. So it should be a whole lot of fun to watch the duration of the rest of Josh Heupel's time there.
And I think Tennessee can stack classes. I mean, I don't want to say this is a disappointing class, finishing 11th by any means, but with where Tennessee took the program on the football field, I think that they're going to see some of those results kind of pile themselves up in the 2024 class. I think that their recruiting is only going to continue to improve moving forward under Josh Heupel.
Looks like we got a little bit of a breaking as well.
Do we have action?
Want to throw this your way, brother. Looks like we got some movement on the Florida State front. What's the latest and what can you tell us?
Yeah, we were talking a minute ago about Andy Jean, staying with Florida, not to Florida State. I mentioned Edwin Joseph, one to watch. He has made it official. He's going to Florida State. Had a great connection with Marcus Woodson there, Mike Norvell. FSU came in a little bit later with an offer than other schools did. Miami made a late run over the last couple of weeks. The favorite at one time was Penn State. I think it came down to location, and distance definitely played a factor in him staying with Florida State in his home state of Florida. He's from the great program Chaminade Madonna. Anytime you can get a player out of a program like that wins, produces like a miniature Alabama, Georgia down there in Hollywood, Florida. This is a big win for Norvell and company at Florida State.
Yeah, like Chad said, big win because he comes in a position in need. Florida State needs defensive backs. They lose Travis Hunter last year. They haven't exactly recruited the high school level very well, especially when it comes to defensive back. So landing the 6 foot, 185-pound Edwin Joseph out of the South Florida area is a huge deal. And like Chad said, they came in late. But guess what, JD? Follow the visits. They got the last one. Edwin Joseph was on campus on December 8th. I believe that was his last official visit that he took. And today, Florida State gets his signature. A big win on the recruiting trail for Mike Norvell.
Just those Florida schools going back and forth, tearing it up.
Haymakers, baby. Haymakers.
It's going to be a full-length feature fight down there in Florida to see how they finish up here on the recruiting trail. Chad, appreciate you dropping some knowledge on us. We're going to be going periodically to Chad Simmons throughout the show. Folks, if you have not yet, subscribe to the channel. We got you covered for National Signing Day and well beyond signing day, I promise you. 12 months a year is college football a sport. We cover it accordingly. So we appreciate you locking in with us. Also, make sure you like the video. Let's see how we can get this thing right around 179. Let's push it to a 500. I think
we need more likes. We got more people watching.
Let's pump it up here. So go ahead and like that video. Hit the thumbs up button. Helps us help you. Going back to Tennessee for a second there. A school that appears to have their NIL ducks in a row. How big of a player, how much does that change the game for them on the recruiting trail in your mind?
I think they're just getting going, right? Because if you have your NIL ducks in a row now in your Tennessee, imagine what happens when you start winning.
Yeah.
And if you can start winning at a high level with NIL, you're going to attract the big brands. Now, once you can attract the big brands into your program, that's where the infusing of money comes from. You no longer have to rely on donations from boosters. You have the money flowing from the big brands, and I think that's where Tennessee could be headed if they can put together another season like last year's.
I love what you said there. When you have people that care about football, whether it's the fan base or it's the boosters, those are the programs that are going to have the opportunity to put resources forth in NIL. But once you start having that product on the field, I mean, people are just itching to help push that thing down the field and really
I think you're always going to get the core group of boosters to donate to NIL, to the boosters, to the various things that the school's asking for. But the more sustainable model is to win on the football field and get these big brands to be the ones that are infusing your money or the cash. And now you can go back to boosters building buildings, boosters building new facilities, and using that money and allocating that to the infrastructure, which it has been for the last couple decades, instead of paying players.
It's remarkable how these programs are attacking the new era of college football. And the way that I see it, the programs that were quick to adjust, like a Tennessee that got in the NIL game quickly and got their ducks in a row, quick, fast, and in a hurry, they're the ones that are reaping the benefits on the front end. And right now, everybody else is kind of trying to play catch up if you're not on Tennessee's level, like Miami is in the NIL game. Sounds like we got a lot of news about to go down here.
What do we got going on?
Sounds like we got
I know we're
Dalen
pulling up
Austin
on
making a decision soon.
Keldrick
Falk making a decision soon. The rumor is Peyton Bowen's making a decision. That's been kind of up in the air. Chad, I want to go to you here real quick. Are you hearing anything about some of those names that I just threw out there, whether it be a Dalen Austin, whether it be a Peyton Bowen, Keldrick Falk, guys that we've kind of watched heading into signing day, but still waiting to see for sure where they're putting pen to paper?
Yeah, I mean, still hearing a lot of buzz around Auburn and their chances to flip Keldrick Falk from Florida State. Again, the last I heard, FSU had not received a final yes or no from Falk. And when that happens this late with a kid committed to a school, typically you start to kind of go and lean towards him flipping a different direction. I think that's one to watch here in the coming minutes. Bowen, obviously, 5-star safety. Notre Dame is doing all they can, as they have for the last 6 to 7 months, to hold on to the elite player out of Texas. This will be huge for Marcus Freeman, a defensive guy, to land a guy who could be the captain of his defense for the next 3 or 4 years in South Bend. Again, Oregon's been working there, Texas A&M, of course, Oklahoma are all schools we're watching. And then you mentioned Dalen Austin, a kid I've mentioned throughout the week. He's been talking about for a while he would be likely a February signee. Now it's come out this week. There's a chance that he signs today. And if he does sign today, I do like Oregon's chances to flip the LSU commit. So we're not just watching if he signs, but also who he signs with if Austin, the 4-star corner from Long Beach Poly, makes that decision.
That'd be a big get going out to the West Coast and landing someone from a very premier program in Southern California in Long Beach Poly. I mean, you go down the list there of guys that have played there and done tremendous things at the college level and beyond, whether it be Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, Antonio Pierce was a coach there for a while. Like, the pedigree of Long Beach Poly is a very serious thing. So Dalen Austin would be a big get. Looks like we got some more news breaking. Joshua Mickens committed to Ohio State, the 4-star edge. Chad, Josh, we'll go with Chad first. I want to hear your thoughts on this as well, Josh. How big of a get is this for Ohio State, a program that needs to continue to bolster the defensive trenches?
Yeah, I think since he took his visit to Ohio State a few weeks ago, he's kind of been trending, maybe even somewhat that quiet, commitment, silent commitment in our world of recruiting to Ohio State. And to me, this is a big win for Ohio State, for Larry Johnson. They're kind of trending away from guys like Mateo, Damon Wilson, going different directions. So to then go in there and land another elite edge guy, defensive lineman, versatile kid, Joshua Mickens, a big win for Ohio State today.
Yeah, I agree. I think you wanted to see how Ohio State was going to answer, because with Mateo Ua-galele trending in the opposite direction, same with Damon Wilson over the past week, you wonder, where are they going to get the help on the edge? They lose Keon Keeley to Alabama. Ohio State was looking for somebody. They get Joshua Mickens, big addition, top 130 player overall, and going to be probably an early impact player at Ohio State.
You think about Ohio State, whenever they have those elite teams that win the Big Ten or make the college football playoff, it's consistently, they got that game record on the edge. Yep. They got the Chase Young. They got the Bosa brothers.
They got the Bosa.
They thought they maybe had the JT Tuimoloau out this year, and maybe they will still in the playoff. They got a big date set with Georgia, but they land a big one, 4-star edge in Joshua Mickens. The Ohio State Buckeyes continuing to build towards getting back to beating Michigan. Chad, we got Peyton Bowen here making a decision here in the very, very near future. For a long time there, it felt like it was going to be Notre Dame. I mean, they had him locked in, obviously, and then it felt like, Notre Dame's trying to hang on, and he's maybe going to go to Oklahoma or somewhere else. I mean, we were going to see where he was headed. But now Notre Dame, it seems like in these last few weeks, made a really strong push to keep him. I know you've talked about this quite a bit, but what's your thought process on Peyton Bowen? We got some news.
Hey,
Chad, throwing it to you, brother.
Breaking news, Oregon flips 5-star safety Peyton Bowen from Notre Dame. We thought maybe Oklahoma, maybe Oregon was the biggest competition, the biggest threat. Obviously, it's known clear now. Oregon was that threat. Oregon has again flipped an elite player from Notre Dame. This morning, Austin Novosad from Baylor, now Peyton Bowen. And they might not be done flipping guys today. They might not be done flipping guys in the next 15, 20 minutes. So let's see. Obviously, huge, a big loss for Notre Dame and a big win for Oregon here with Peyton Bowen, a guy who will play, I think, right away in Eugene.
Yeah, number 2 ranked safety overall, the 13th best player in America. Shout out to Sam Spiegelman coming on the Inside Scoop week after week to talk about Peyton Bowen. He flips while we're on the show. Sorry Sam's not here, but Sam always had it in the back of his mind. He always told me, Josh, watch the O's, meaning Oklahoma and Oregon for Peyton Bowen. And in the end, it's the Ducks. What a day for the Ducks. And
coming out of nowhere.
Now, I don't have the updated top 10 yet.
We're going to find out. We just requested it from
We
graphics.
just requested.
All right,
we wanted, the They're running the algorithms as we speak to see what this is going to do. How is this going to impact the top 10? Because I've been saying it was critical for Notre Dame if they wanted to hold on to a top 5 class, let alone a top, maybe even slide out of the top 10, they needed to hold on to Peyton Bowen. Notre Dame didn't have enough firepower on the board. There's not enough high-ranking commitment or targets out there for them to really improve their position at this point. I think they were on the defensive today. We'll see. Might not be the last flip away from Notre Dame, and it also might not be the last flip to Oregon. Chad working on some scoop as we speak. Oregon really putting together a day here on signing day.
Where else are you getting this kind of coverage, man? Where else you got Chad Simmons in the booth with the Jordan 3s on, the elephant print, the JTs, as he likes to say. Man, we got it locked and loaded here. We appreciate y'all spending some time with us again.
We're just getting started here, having a little bit of fun.
Peyton Bowen is a duck, man.
Yeah.
Dan Lanning going to work in the last 24 hours. That's Austin Novosad saying, you know what, Baylor's great, want to go to Eugene. Peyton Bowen saying, I wanted to win one for the Gipper, but now I'm going to Eugene as well. Yeah. Do you think that the branding of Oregon and the Nike NIL factor, I'm sure that plays into that? I mean, what is the
I think all those things play into
it.
But I think the critical mistake here for Notre Dame was bringing Peyton Bowen in on his official visit in July. He's a prospect out of the state of Texas. When you burn your official visit, each school can only bring a prospect on one official visit. That means that they can pay for your trip out there. Now, a prospect can visit Notre Dame on his own dime as many times as he wants. But when that prospect lives in the state of Texas and you're in Indiana, it's hard to get there on their own dime. So once they burned that official visit on Peyton Bowen in July, they no longer had access to him when they wanted him. Like, if they would have held on to that official visit and maybe brought him in October or November and wine him and dine him and let him know why he committed. It's been 11 months since he committed to Notre Dame, and now he is signing with Oregon.
It's a what have you done for me lately kind of world, honestly.
And follow the visit kind of world.
Follow the visits, man. And Oregon landing a huge get in Peyton Bowen, deciding he wants to be a Duck. What is your perceived impact, Josh, on the top 10? Oregon, at the time of Peyton Bowen flipping, I believe they were right around that top 15 slot.
Yeah, can we get a refresh?
How high do you make a jump? I think they're at 14 as of late. We're still waiting to see what the algorithm runs. Sorry, they were 14 is what I meant. How high do you think they could jump? Are they a team that maybe finds themselves inside of the top 10 with landing a 5-star?
I think based on the day that they're having right now, based on what we know, I think that they are not done.
Okay.
So even if they're sitting just outside the top 10 right now, when the algos are done printing up the, Chad Simmons raised his hand.
Well, I'll just chime in.
We got action. Go ahead.
I'll just chime in on that, basically. I think, Oregon is far from done. I think, again, we talked about Austin for a second. If he does sign today or sign early, I like Oregon's chance. We talked about Mateo. I mentioned, flips earlier. Jaden Lamar, the running back from Notre Dame. Could he follow Bowen now to Oregon? But Oregon could also lose one today. One of their top commitments on the defensive side, Caleb Presley, 4-star cornerback out of the Seattle area, is trending towards staying home with Washington. As you said, Josh, follow the visits. He's been to Washington recently this month. It's an in-state program, a local program. So it may not all be roses today in Oregon. They could lose one as well in Caleb Presley.
All right. Well, as it stands right now, Oregon just put themselves in the top 10. They bumped Clemson in the 10 spot. Oregon sits in 10. They go from 14 to 10. Chad, coming back to you.
Let's go, man.
Hey, it's a big hour right here.
I love it, man. I love it. Let's go.
It's confirmed Kelvin Falk has flipped to Auburn from Florida State. I hinted to this a couple days ago. Obviously, when he made that trip from Tallahassee on Saturday to Auburn on Sunday, Auburn got the last shot. He spent about 6 to 7 hours on the planes with the new staff, Hugh Freeze, strength and conditioning, nutrition. He did the whole photo shoot with the uniform. He met the new D-line coach, new defensive staff. And I definitely got the feeling over the last 12 to 24 hours, Auburn was definitely going to get this one in the end. And he decided to stay home an hour and a half from his hometown of Highland Home, Alabama. This is a huge get for Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers. This was a need for Florida State, a need for Auburn, in-state win for Auburn. This is a very big win on multiple levels for Hugh Freeze.
And Chad, Florida State, signing day gives, signing day takes. Florida State now losing this. What does this mean for the Noles?
I mean, it's a tough loss. I mean, they beat schools like Clemson, Auburn, and other programs that were in the mix for Falk, who has been an elite recruit in that state since his freshman year. He's from a small town below Montgomery, big-time player, has a brother in that 2025 class, is going to be a big-time recruit as well. Expect for Auburn to jump in that one pretty quickly. They're a very tight-knit family, so it's very tough, I think, tough loss, for Florida State. They went all in on this one. They were surprised, I think, when they found out Falk took that trip to Auburn on Sunday. When he left Tallahassee on Saturday, there was some confidence they were going to hold on here and didn't think he would take any more trips. He had that 1 day left. He took advantage of it, and Auburn capitalized in landing Keldrick Falk.
And it kind of shows the direction of Auburn, I think, right? I mean, Hugh Freeze only been there, a few short weeks now, already cooking and getting a big-time player in edge Keldrick Falk, a 4-star out of the home state. That's a big deal, Josh.
Oh, yeah. And, for Florida State fans especially, this is kind of reminiscent of last year. Of course, it's not on the same level of losing a Travis Hunter. However, it does show a major issue for Florida State, and that's recruiting at the high school level. Because if you look at their highest-rated recruits, you have Hakeem Williams on the offensive side, and then you had Keldrick Falk on the defensive side. And of their defensive recruits, heading into signing it, now they have a good class, they have a very solid class, I should say, but heading into today, I would say the only defensive prospect on that commit list that other big-time teams were pursuing was Keldrick Falk. So for Florida State to lose the one guy, once again, that they really wanted on that defensive side of the ball, that's a big blow and something that Florida State is going to need to fix moving forward.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And we just got the updated rankings. Looks like Oregon moved from the 14, catapulted all the way into the 10 spot, landing the commitment and signature of Peyton Bowen. Chad, what's up, my man? We got some more scoop. What's going on, big dog?
Fire away.
Big news for the Oregon Ducks once again.
No,
Mateo is an Oregon Duck. They came in there, swooped in late, took him out of L.A. Obviously, Ohio State was the long-time, at least perceived front runner with that Larry Johnson connection. But again, credit to Tosh Lapoy, Dan Lanning, that Oregon staff for never giving up, connecting with the family. Obviously, Mateo has been there for visits before multiple times. Earlier this year, took an OV to Oregon as well. Again, huge win. And to stay on that topic, he's an elite player from St. John Bosco. We've talked about DeAndre Moore, a Louisville commit. I've just gotten word that he's likely not going to sign today now. Texas is trying to flip him. There's been some confidence in Austin that he would flip to Texas today, but there's a lot of depth to this commitment right here for DeAndre Moore. This is a big one for him. Big decision. He's teammates with multiple guys committed and expected to sign with Louisville today with Pierce Clarkson, Aaron Williams, teammates there at St. John Bosco. But the big news for Oregon, Mateo's a Duck. And then concern, I think, at both Louisville, maybe even Texas, DeAndre Moore likely not signing today now.
Mateo Ua-galele, a guy who's played at the top level of high school football in the Trinity League in Southern California, St. John Bosco High School, so you know that whatever he puts on tape, that's legit. And now Oregon holding off Ohio State, a team that is going to be in the playoff this year, has proven over the years they've been able to put a consistent product. Dan Lanning, in just his first year at Oregon, building the defense. It feels to me, Chad, like they're building almost an SEC style of program out there. Is that maybe something that you would anticipate Dan Lanning to continue to try to do, building on the defensive side? And obviously a guy with defensive history on what he did at Georgia, being the defensive coordinator. Is that intentional by Dan Lanning in Oregon right now, Chad?
Oh, 100%. I mean, he knows what it takes to win, to win a championship.
Build it through
he's
the
seen
trenches.
Alabama do it to Georgia, and he's beaten Alabama with Georgia. He knows what it takes to win. Like you said, JD, you got to win up front. You got to be physical. You got to be tough. You got to have depth. And you got to be able to outman the person in front of you to win the national championship. There's one thing to win the Pac-12. Now, eventually, what they're going to be, USC is going away, UCLA, it's going to be a different type of Pac-12.
Yeah.
But you can make him win that with what you have with skill guys and finesse players. But to win against the big boys in that 12-team playoff coming down the road, you better have some big boys that play mean, that play tough, that play physical, that can battle not only Alabama and Georgia, but the LSUs, the Texases, the Ohio States, because you're going to have to come across the country and beat teams like that. And kids know that, too, about Dan. They know he's a defensive-minded guy. They know where he came from, and they do like his style and kind of what he's trying to build to kind of replicate what Bama and Georgia do in the South.
No, Chad, I think you're absolutely on the money. Having 2 5-star gets for Dan Lanning after just 1 season at Oregon, Josh, they're building that thing on the defensive side.
Yeah. Dan Lanning is definitely drinking coffee this morning. They are closing today. Unbelievable run, and these are key positions. You get your QB, you get your man in the trenches, you get a Peyton Bowen. I haven't even had time to kind of take in the Peyton Bowen news before we even find out that Mateo Ua-galele has signed. So just going back to Peyton Bowen, he's a guy that, like Chad said, I believe is going to come in and make an early impact. You've seen in the highlights what he's doing with these punts and kicks. If he doesn't get in the secondary, he's definitely seeing the field in special teams. Love what Peyton Bowen does. Love that Dan Lanning is putting together a SEC caliber class right now. He's leaving Georgia, going to Oregon, and really putting it on in 2023 recruiting. Just unbelievable.
Just consistently building on that side. Made a ton of moves on Sunday. That's the 3rd big-time player they've landed.
Chad, are they done?
No. I mean, what more can I say? Simple answer of no. They are not done. Stay tuned. If it doesn't happen here shortly, it'll happen later this afternoon. They will add more to this top 10 class.
All right. Well, we tore up the last graphic because Oregon sat at number 10, going from 14 to 10 after signing Peyton Bowen. Now they land Mateo Ua-galele. We got to get a whole new graphic in here.
They're all the way up to 8.
8 now,
They're
okay.
number 8 in the On3 consensus team recruiting rankings. Like Chad said, they ain't done. How high can this Oregon team go in these rankings? Are they potentially going to be flirting with that top 5 level?
They absolutely could see the top 5 if, when David Hicks makes his decision, if he picks Oregon, he's a 5-star plus defensive lineman, number 1 in America to his position. I think that could push them into or right around the edge of the top 5. To see them at number 8 right now, Oklahoma at 9, Florida now sits at 10, and Clemson suffers. They get bounced out of the top 10. Clemson now sits at 11.
Unbelievable. And think about how we were talking about Oregon just a few days ago. They're licking their wounds from losing Dante Moore. And are they going to get a quarterback this cycle? What's going on at Oregon? They're on the outside looking at number 14 going into the day. Skyrocketed up the rankings.
I kind of had the feeling of Oregon like, oh, it was a nice run. They really came to play for a majority of the cycle. Good story, but you lose Dante Moore. What are you going to do with the all-important quarterback position? Well, I had them all wrong. They had everything figured out. I'm thinking that they're just going to fizzle out to the finish and ho-hum day. But boy, Oregon has quickly become the story of the day.
Just been chipping away on signing day, man. Talk about a late mover and making moves when it counts the most. Oregon at number 8. Keep an eye, though, on that top 10. I promise you there will be more changes within that top 10 On3 consensus team recruiting rankings. If you have not yet subscribed, we got Chad Simmons here. We got Josh Newberg to my left. We got Nick Brake running the whole operation. We are not on flip watch.
Nope.
Locked in for the duration of signing day, so make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're liking the video, too. It helps us help you. It's a good deal. Let's talk a little bit more about Texas, because Cedric Baxter did end up signing. So, Texas fans, if you were holding your breath, you were maybe, pacing the room during signing day, and you're biting the fingernails at the office. He signed.
The thing with Cedric Baxter, the rumors were always going to be there until he signed because of the in-state Florida schools. Both in-state Florida schools need a running back. They really need a running back like a Cedric Baxter. I don't think either Florida or Florida State, or even Miami for that matter, was going to give up on Cedric Baxter until that ink was dry. Well, the ink is dry. And what do you think of Cedric Baxter stepping in and playing as a freshman at Texas?
I mean, I think that they have a stacked running back room. They got some other good, excuse me, what I'm trying to say. They have some other solid commits and signings in this class. Trey Wisner being one of them from the state of Texas. So I think for him to be able to see some carries is definitely realistic. And running back's also one of those positions where it's not so difficult to step in day one. Not to say it's not a transition or you don't have to still hit the weight room. It's been done. And so for Cedric Baxter, getting to Austin and being able to get in that weight room and just start digesting the playbook, I think that's going to be crucial. But Will he hit the? I don't expect him to be a redshirt guy for my money.
No, I don't see that happen.
Yep.
Especially the running back position nowadays. Like you said, even if you're bringing in other talent, Cedric Baxter, if he averages 6-7 touches a game, he's going to make an impact and he's going to help that team.
Absolutely. With Bijan Robinson going to the NFL,
Right.
Roshan Johnson, likely
There's
not
production
being,
to be had.
There's a lot of production left. They got some backs on campus, but for what Steve Sarkisian does offensively, it's that RPO system, meaning you have to run to have the pass option. And so toting the rock with Tashard Choice being the running back coach there at Texas, he's a dog on the recruiting trail as well. They are going to have a stable of young backs at their access to play this year in Austin. So it should be
More
fun.
weapons.
More weapons, no problems. Always a good way to get down in Austin. Josh, where were we?
I mean,
we're talking
We're
about
all
Peyton
over the
Bowen
place.
landing with Oregon, Mateo Ua-galele. Oregon is skyrocketing. Cedric Baxter finally inks to Texas.
What's up next?
You know,
for us?
we talked a little bit about the quarterbacks earlier and where they're going. We have the luxury of having On3's Director of Scouting and Rankings, Charles Power, give us some superlatives for this class. What do you say we get that teed up in and hear what Charles has to say? Before we do that, though, I want to hear your thoughts on this class one more time before we go to superlatives.
Man, just the class in general?
Let's say one word to describe this class is what?
Well, this class, it's kind of like watching an F1 race. Like Max Verstappen, you don't watch F1, so this is going to go way over your head. But when Max Verstappen has a 15-second lead, they don't even put the camera on the number 1 car. Like, we just watch the battle for 5th and 6th. It's kind of what's happening today with the excitement that's happening at the end of the top 10. Teams slipping in, slipping out. All the action today is really happening 5 through 10. Not to say that 1 through 5 aren't signing great classes. They are. There's just not a lot of drama there. So I'm having fun watching some of these secondary battles take place.
Absolutely. One thing Charles Power said in the office was there's so much potential in this group, and this could be the year of the quarterback riser, is one thing he said. But without further ado,
Let's hear
we're going to
from
throw Charles Power with his quarterback superlatives for the 2023 class.
Yeah, guys, this 2023 quarterback cycle is deep with blue chip arms. I think that's really the story of the quarterback group in 2023 is just how many top passers there are and just the sheer numbers of the group. So we decided to give out some superlatives to just kind of paint a picture of what each of these top quarterbacks bring to the table and can kind of help separate them out a little bit and kind of shine a light on their strengths. So starting out, Arch Manning, Texas signee, is been one of the most well-known recruits that we've really ever seen in the modern recruiting era. And so Arch Manning has, in our opinion, the quickest release we've seen in a couple cycles. Just the ball gets out really, really quickly. It's an effortless throwing motion. It's really been apparent since his freshman season at Newman in New Orleans. And I think just seeing Arch progress over the course of his high school career from his freshman season to his senior season, had a really strong senior year as a passer, and I think we saw continued progression on that part and just the arm strength he added to go with the quick release. I think it makes him one of the higher floor passers in the cycle. For most physically gifted, we're going with Nico Iamaleava, the Tennessee commit. Pretty easy choice here. You haven't seen nearly, I think, all but one of these on 300 quarterbacks in person. Nico stands head and shoulders above the rest in terms of just the physical gifts. He's well over 6'5", 190 to 200 pounds, big hands, and he can just do things with the football a lot of these other quarterbacks just really can't do in terms of his arm strength, quick release. And I think you pair the size and the arm strength with his twitchy athleticism and his ability to react and make improvisational plays, deal with the pass rush. I think his physical gifts put him head and shoulders above the rest, at least in terms of pure traits at the position. Most well-rounded, we're going with Jackson Arnold, the Oklahoma signee. Jackson Arnold is, for my money, probably the surest bet at the quarterback position in 2023, given what he's done on Friday nights against top competition in Texas's second highest classification. He's been a 2-year starter at Denton Guyer, very productive. He can do a little bit of everything in terms of what you want to ask a quarterback to do. Quick release, strong arm, can push the ball vertically, accurate on the high school level, completing around 69% of his passes as a senior. He's got a compact build. He probably doesn't have quite the frame or stature of a Nico or Arch Manning, but he's kind of stockily built, but has big hands. He's not like a small frame quarterback by any means, and really took his game to another level as a senior in his second year as a starter. I think he averaged around 294 yards a game per pass attempt, and really did a lot of damage on the ground this year as well, running over 900 yards and 24 touchdowns. So I think you look at Jackson Arnold, I think he's going to be ready to play as a freshman at Oklahoma, runs the same system and is at his high school that Oklahoma runs. So he's going to come in ready to go, and I think he's going to have a lot of expectations on his shoulders in Norman. Most polished, we're going with Malachi Nelson, the USC signee. We've known about Malachi, really similar to Arch Manning, since his freshman season at Los Alamitos in California. I think when you think about Malachi Nelson, it is how smooth he is, the polish. He's pretty technically refined. You can tell he's had some private quarterback coaching. I've seen Malachi in so many different settings over the last year plus. It seems like he's at every event and typically performs pretty well. So you can kind of put him in any situation. He's generally going to kind of be in the top group of quarterbacks. He has a strong rapport with his USC fellow signee, Mekhi Lemon, his high school receiver. Seems to get on a pretty good page with his targets. So I think he is one who's going to need, I think, some physical development, but in terms of the technical skills and just how many passes he's thrown, whether it's in the high school level, 7-on-7, in camp settings, he's a pretty well-established commodity as a passer. Most productive, we're going with Lincoln Kienholz, the Ohio State commit. Lincoln Kienholz is a historic quarterback in South Dakota. He really might be the most well-known or best high school boys athlete in the history of the state. He had a monster senior season, leading his team to his third straight state title with him as a starter. Just kind of going through his stats, I mean, he averaged 5.8 touchdowns per game. That's over nearly a touchdown and a half more than the next on 300 quarterback. 404 yards per game was 110 yards more than the next quarterback. So just a gaudy production. I think he accounted for 4,800 yards in 12 games. So just dominated that competition like you would expect. When you look at just the production against, less than stellar competition for sure, but pair that with his multi-sport profile, which also might be the best in the cycle, I think his production was what you would expect for a national quarterback playing in South Dakota. So yeah, guys, this is a really, really good quarterback cycle in terms of the depth. Each guy brings a little bit something different to the table, and we thought divvying out some superlatives would be a good way to show just kind of the uniqueness and the different flavors within this 2023 quarterback cycle.
Okay. How's the heart rate doing? Everybody good? Everybody feeling a little more settled in? We got the superlatives from Charles. Phenomenal work again by Charles Power, Director of Scouting and Rankings. Josh, why don't you kind of reset the top 10 for us here as we get some big news, some big commitments, some flip action. Where are we sitting right now in terms of the top 10?
All right, like I said, you got Max Verstappen. Alabama way out in front right now. Georgia sitting at number 2. It gets more interesting as we go down the list. Ohio State at number 3. Miami at number 4. They've slipped from 3 to 4 today. Not a big deal. Texas at number 5. LSU sitting at 6. Notre Dame 7. Oregon at 8. OU and Florida round out the top 10. Look at Oregon smashing the gas, going from 14 to 8 in a matter of about an hour and a half. Since we started this show, I should say, Oregon was sitting at the 14 spot. They're now at 8. Chad says they're not even done yet, so we'll see. This graphic might need to go in the trash before the show's over, too.
When I was driving through the Chick-fil-A breakfast line today, Oregon was at 14.
Yeah.
Shot up jetpack style into the top 6. Could be flirting with the top 5 class when it's all said and done. LSU currently at 6.
Yeah.
Chad, some news just broke a moment ago that pertained to the Tigers, not necessarily in the most positive way. What's that news? Then after that, I want to ask you who's still out there.
Yeah, the positive news is for Mississippi State. Obviously, keeping Isaac Smith at home. 4-star safety was at LSU over the weekend for his official visit. There was some buzz, at least some hope, in Baton Rouge that they would be able to steal this one. But we know if you follow recruiting, you cover recruiting like I do for a long time, it is hard to pull kids out of what they call the SIP. I mean, Mississippi, those kids are homegrown, homebred. And he told me last night, giving me the story, Isaac, that it just feels powerful. His words were powerful to stay home and represent his home state with the Mississippi State Bulldogs. So obviously a tough loss, but I think LSU knew they were in for a fight trying to get this guy out of the home state of Mississippi State, but a big win for that program going through a tough time right now with Mike Leach, but a big win on the recruiting trail with Isaac Smith.
No, absolutely. And Zach Arnett, the defensive coordinator, now being made the head coach of Mississippi State. I'm sure that probably played a factor in his recruitment. Chad, a lot of guys that are still out there. We're still waiting to see where they end up signing. Who are some names that you're currently watching as signing day wears on?
Yeah, I mean, for all that's happened over the last, 30 to 45 minutes specifically, there's still some dudes out there. I mean, you have to start with Cormani McClain, right? 5-star plus corner for us out of Lakeland, has not signed still with the University of Miami despite being a commitment to the Canes. And you have guys like 5-star edge Damon Wilson, 5-star teammates D lineman Jane Smith, edge Quay Russaw. You have a guy who's on flip watch, 4-star running back to Notre Dame, Jaden Lamar. Oregon is a school to watch there. We've talked about Dalen Austin. At one time, he was looking to commit, sign late in February. There's been some buzz here recently by him possibly signing today. So still some big names, of course, still looking ahead. You got Jordan Hall tomorrow, Desmond Ricks tomorrow, David Hicks on Friday. Who knows about when Cormani McClain he might take an OV to Boulder, Colorado in January sometime. So there's a lot still happening out there with all the big names that are now off the board. There's still a lot more out there to follow and listen to you guys talk about.
As long as Coach Prime's on the trail, man, nobody is safe until pen meets paper. Josh, I want to get your thoughts on this. The longer this Cormani McClain decision, I don't know if that's the right word, maybe not signing wears on, how much does that concern Hurricane fans? Is that okay, we'll get things worked out, or is it the longer he stays unsigned, the more other sharks can circle?
Who knows? But right now, Deion Sanders is terrorizing in-state Florida football. I mean, last year it was Travis Hunter. This year, maybe it's Cormani McClain. And I'm not even saying, I don't know. There is reports that Deion has been in contact with 5-star plus cornerback Cormani McClain, but even if he's not, I mean, I think the Gators are a reasonable option. I think Alabama is a team that had a lot of interest in Cormani McClain and wanted to get him on campus for an official visit right before his commitment to Miami, but he decided not to take that visit. He commits to Miami. Things were really quiet until this morning.
Yeah.
I mean, Cormani McClain's own mother put out yesterday that he would be signing in a ceremony at Lakeland High School, kind of ho-hum. You hear that a lot when recruits are committed. They still go through with their signing day ceremony at their high school. But then this morning, kind of out of nowhere, there weren't any rumors, there weren't any reports. She says that Cormani McClain will not be signing today. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's kind of the theme of signing day. No news is typically good news. Chad, would you say that's the case when it comes to signing day?
I mean, I'm just going off what Josh was saying. I'm starting to get a little bit used to this trend with Cormani's mom. The last time before he announced his commitment, the day before, he put a tweet out, everyone's welcome, it's at the school, Lakeland, 7 p.m., all that. Day of, sorry, no media allowed at this event. We knew at that point something was going on because the day before, all the buzz was around the University of Florida. Yesterday, she puts out before signing day, Cormani will be signing tomorrow. We all expect University of Miami. Today, this morning, she puts out a tweet, he will no longer be signing today. So what does that mean? Will it play out like it did last time? We all thought Florida. She closed the ceremony. He goes to Miami. We all thought yesterday, wide open, he's going to Miami today, lock it in. Will he end up at Colorado? There's starting to be a little bit of a trend here with those tweets and following her on social media.
I'll just throw this out there, Chad. How surprised would you be if Cormani McClain ends up signing somewhere that's not even in the state of Florida, meaning it's not the Gators, it's not Miami? I would think the early leader in the clubhouse, if it wasn't one of those two schools, would be Colorado based on the rumblings. But how surprising would that be in your mind for Cormani?
I mean, you have to wonder while we're on this show, is Alabama trying to jump back in this race? At one time, that was the out-of-state school to keep an eye on. He mentioned schools like at different times, LSU, Ohio State, and Georgia, along the way. But Alabama was at one time at least thought to be in the top two, maybe the leader in the summer. But obviously him taking that OV to Miami kind of shifted things away from Bama and then more Florida, Miami. But I think it is surprising that Colorado, I guess it is, but it isn't. When you think about who the head coach is there now, it really isn't surprising. Anything is possible with anybody that's not signed right now. Coach Prime could be having conversations with those guys. I mean, that's just reality.
Yeah, and he did it. It is reality because last year there was whispers. There was whispers leading up to signing day that maybe Travis Hunter's flipping. Well, guess what? Everybody thought if Travis Hunter's flipping, it'll be to Georgia because they're a bona fide Power 5 team. In Jackson State, they can't sign the #1 player in America. They did. Now it's a reality. So now when you start hearing these rumors about Cormani McClain being linked to Colorado, you start to understand, like, wow, is Deion really going to do it? And I think Chad's right. The first step, obviously, is for him not to sign today. Deion could possibly get a foot in the door. Cormani McClain, I believe, has taken 3 official visits, so I think he has 2 remaining. Like I said earlier, you cannot take 2 official visits to the same school. You can only take 1. So he's taken 1 to Florida. I think he's taken 1 to Miami. Don't believe he's taken 1 to Alabama yet. So there could be room for him to take a trip to Alabama or Colorado, maybe both. If he decides, you can't do that until January. If he decides to push his recruitment into the month of January, it opens a host of different options for him.
And you would have to think for someone like Cormani McClain, who is from the same state that Deion Sanders is from, plays the same position that Deion Sanders is from, you would imagine has aspirations to play big-time football in the NFL and make a lot of money there. The pitch for Deion Sanders is pretty easy to a guy like Cormani McClain. Hey, come be with me. Come be a part of what I'm building at Colorado.
Come line up across from Travis Hunter.
Oh, man. You kidding me? You kidding me? I mean, the script writes itself. And so for a high school kid to be told by somebody who has gone and been to where you aspire to go to, I think the pitch is really, really, clean, quite frankly, if you're Deion Sanders, and especially at the corner position. So we'll keep an eye on that. Chad, obviously, with the latest inside scoop, Josh Newberg as well, making sure we're keeping you locked in for every single thing going on around the college football landscape today on National Signing Day. Kind of like recruiting Christmas. Is that a fair way to put it?
Hey, how's your Wednesday going?
It's good, man. It's good.
This is not your average Wednesday.
Biggest Wednesday of the week, for sure. But no, fired up to have you along with us. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you're subscribed because Deion Sanders, if he does land Cormani McClain, I promise you, we'll be all over it. We'll have our thoughts. We'll have intel from Chad Simmons. It'll be a real good time. So make sure you keep it locked here on the On3 YouTube channel. Deion Sanders going into his first year at the helm in Boulder, Colorado. Going to follow a lot of other coaches that are finishing up their first year, more or less their first real signing class. One guy that's on a tear right now, Dan Lanning in Oregon. Let's just start there with the Ducks. He's building a program that we're at 14 to start the day. They've shot all the way up to 8 in the top 10. What are your thoughts, again, on Oregon and what they've done so far on National Signing Day?
1, I'm amazed. 2, I don't think they're done. On3's Hayes Fawcett just put up the bat signal. He tweeted a duck emoji.
Ooh.
So Hayes Fawcett's tweeting out duck emojis right now. We know they're not finished quite yet.
Cinematic.
I'm really impressed with what Dan Lanning's done. I was impressed with what he did before today. So for him to come out and flip Peyton Bowen, to add a quarterback this morning that was well scripted. Flipping Austin Novosad was not an easy move. That was something that was in the works for a while, despite losing Dante Moore. You thought for a minute, hey, maybe Dan Lanning's going to get caught flat-footed here. He just loses his offensive coordinator, Kenny Dillingham, to Arizona State. He loses his 5-star quarterback that they put in so much time, money, and resources into recruiting him for an entire cycle. It looks like, hey, this is just what happens with a first-year head coach trying to jump into the big leagues for his first real recruiting cycle. You get beat up a little bit. But guess what? Dan Lanning on signing day is the one doing the beating.
Looked like flat-footed. Turns out it was just web-footed.
Yeah.
He's just swimming. They threw him in the water, started swimming. Dan Lanning has been absolutely rolling today, and I don't think people remember this quite as much, but Austin Novosad was in conversations at least around recruiting circles of, is he going to flip to Ohio State? Is he going to go somewhere else? The Hayes Fawcett graphic drops where he reaffirms his commitment to Baylor. I believe that was either during the fall maybe
the kiss
or
of death.
Late summer. And then obviously on signing day, one thing leads to another. And Oregon continues to tear it up. Sounds like more from them if you're trusting Hayes Fawcett on Twitter, which we would definitely encourage you to do so. Chad, what's the latest, my man? We got some more scoop. We appreciate you joining us. What's the latest that you're hearing on the phone line?
Yeah, I can touch on Georgia. Obviously, Dan Lanning is connected to Georgia. We haven't talked too much about them yet, even though they're going to close in on probably a top 2, top 3 class when all said and done. They have just signed a target that maybe to them was higher on their board than his ranking may show, being a 3-star athlete in Kyron Jones. Not too long ago, reopened his recruitment from the NC State, took an OV to Nebraska over the weekend. He was at Georgia a weekend ago, and Georgia loved this kid. From Will Muschamp to Fran Brown, now even Dale McGee at running back. They're bringing this kid kind of in as a jack of all trades. I think likely will start at DB. But being that they lost Justice Haynes at second back in this class to Alabama, he may get a look at running back as well. So, again, I think Georgia's just getting started today and maybe into tomorrow. So keep an eye on the Georgia Bulldogs these next couple of days.
Yeah, Chad, do they have too many targets still left on the board in your mind? I mean, I know there's still some big-name guys, obviously with Damon Wilson being one of them, but is there a lot of work still to be done with Georgia currently the number 2 class?
Hey, I mean, I think for Georgia, the Hayes and the Barman, they did the work these last few months, and I think they have a great shot to close with Damon Wilson and Jordan Hall. I think 2 guys that are extremely high on their boards and boards across the country. Damon Wilson being a 5-star freak edge guy, you know, a top 5 player for Charles Power and us on 3 out of Venice, Florida, and then going down to Jacksonville, Jordan Hall, an elite DL that's coveted by Alabama, Florida, Ohio State, LSU. Georgia's in a great spot there tomorrow afternoon as well. And again, if Georgia closes like expected, that they will challenge for that top class in the country.
Just stacking classes, man. Stacking it in the trenches.
And that's how you got to do it. If you want to be the next great college football dynasty like Georgia is trying to achieve right now, you got to stack classes. You can't mess around. You got to land number 1 players at their position, which is what we are seeing Georgia do right now. And it's pretty fun to watch.
It's something that's historic and something, too, for Georgia. We get so caught up in the stars and the names and what they did at the high school level. Georgia takes one premier talent, but they develop it at such an elite level. Like, you go to Georgia, you're going to get developed to the nth degree, and they're going to get the absolute most out of you when it comes to
which I think is why we haven't seen Georgia hammer the transfer portal like we've seen other programs do, because they're bringing in number 1 player backed up by a number 1 player backed up by a number 1 player. You don't need to go to the transfer portal if you're able to develop. If you're able to keep the players on your roster, and one way Georgia's been able to do that, you know, depth charts matter if you're not winning the national championship.
Yeah.
When you're winning the national championship and you're competing year in, year out for a national title, Alabama has proved this. Depth charts don't matter as much. Don't get me saying depth charts don't matter in recruiting, because they always do, but they don't matter as much, and you're able to retain a lot of that talent and, like you said, develop it, and no need to go into the portal and grab players. You're bringing them up through your system, breeding them through your culture, and it all piles up together. It's a big help.
You don't need to go to the grocery store and buy milk when you're on a farm and you can get it from the cow. That's what I'm saying. You don't got to go acquire it. Some news breaking out of Tallahassee, looks like.
Okay.
Chad, looks like we got a little bit of news on the Florida State front. Tell the good people at home what's going on right now.
I actually missed that.
I got you. Chad,
actually, I was about ready to put my emoji alert, another flip alert on my end right now. I haven't got there yet.
I got it. Listen, JD.
I jumped the gun. False start on me, Chad.
Yeah, for the last 12 years, I've been covering Florida State. So if there's one guy I can jump in on, it's a Florida State commitment. They land offensive tackle Chris Otto. He's a 3-star commitment out of Key West. Have you ever been to Key West?
Haven't been to Key West.
Key West is out there. It's an island on the tip of Florida. It's about 4 hours from Miami.
Okay.
So it's out there. But anyway, Chris Otto, I like him. He's a 6'4.5", 6'5", about 290 pounds. He has that wrestling pedigree to him, and was a late addition by Florida State. I think he was a guy that they were actually trying to keep quiet. He's a 3-star offensive tackle in Key West, like I said. They brought him in on an official visit a week ago, and he signs with Florida State today. A good pickup for the Seminoles on the offensive line.
And that wrestling pedigree is a factor, especially in the trenches where hand placement, having strong hands is so crucial, being able to leverage your body effectively. So Chris Otto is going to be a Seminole, put pen to paper. That's a very big deal for the Noles. Noles in a big get in Miami's backyard, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alex Atkins just keeps doing it for Florida State. It's his time of year. The Florida State coaching staff isn't a great recruiting staff, but boy, does Alex Atkins, Florida State's offensive coordinator, offensive line coach, come through when they need him.
Knows how to recruit emphatically. And one school they actually beat earlier in the year, actually very first game of the year, was another coach in his first year, Brian Kelly.
Yeah.
Took over the Tigers. And they're making some noise at the number 6 spot right now in the On3 consensus team recruiting rankings. But what are your thoughts on what LSU's been able to do today, sticking in that top 10 for the most part?
It's impressive to see. There were some questions about whether Brian Kelly was a good fit at LSU. There was even more questions about Brian Kelly after he lost to Florida State to open the season.
Yeah.
But he solidified things. He solidified things on the football field, and guess what? Also on the recruiting trail. Signing 5-star wide receiver Shelton Sampson. Brian Kelly is just doing what we thought he would do when he came in and faked that Cajun accent in the Bayou.
I love what the lower third says, Brian Kelly, and then all caps, recruits. I mean, he recruits, and that was one thing that I think people knocked him a bit for at Notre Dame. That those are the fans that were kind of on the outside looking in, didn't have a great gauge for all that goes on at Notre Dame and the difficulty that it is to recruit to a place like South Bend, Indiana, and all the hoops you got to jump through with admissions. But for Brian Kelly to make it such a point to recruit the way he has so far in his first year at LSU and having a strong product on the field, I think is only going to bolster this recruiting class and his efforts going forward.
Yeah.
They're doing it in state too, Josh. They're protecting the boot.
Yeah, and that's when LSU's at their best, they're landing the best players out of the boot, and then they're kind of filtering in from Texas, from Florida a little bit. And this year, I think the theme of this class has really been the secondary. I know they just miss on Isaac Smith, a player that they wanted really badly. But last week they land Javian Toviano. And Chad, I want to go to you. Tomorrow we are expected to hear from 5-star defensive back Desmond Ricks out of IMG Academy. Desmond Ricks' final visit was to LSU. Who else is in contention for Ricks' commitment tomorrow?
Yeah, Josh, we should be here, I think, around 5:30 Eastern time tomorrow. Ricks will make that decision. And, he said a lot about 6 weeks ago. Not only did he announce his finalists and all that, but he also reclassified, then graduating early. I mean, he's really accelerated things going from he should be signing this time next year. Now he's signing now and leaving school and going to play for somebody in college in January. There's a lot of buzz around LSU right now. Great job by that staff from Brian Kelly, Matt House, Robert Steeples, the staffers that outside of the on the field staff. They did a great job in Baton Rouge making those guys, not just Ricks, but his family, feel very comfortable. And they're up against 2 other SEC foes, Alabama and Florida. He took the Florida OV first, followed by Alabama. LSU got the final official visit. And he's been pretty quiet until things have been pretty quiet until about yesterday around this time. Things started to get out more about LSU seeming to be the team to beat. The buzz is around the LSU Tigers. Some think Alabama's number 2. Some think Florida is number 2. But right now, the consistent number 1 is LSU based on each source I talked to. So things look good as far as LSU being the team to beat 24-ish hours out for Desmond Ricks.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see LSU recruit the secondary without Corey Raymond there. For so long, Corey Raymond was a staple of building that LSU secondary into what it is, and now he's gone, but LSU recruiting still hot.
Continuing to stack defensive backs on top of defensive backs, and that's kind of been the branding for LSU previously is come play at DBU, right? I mean, you got the Patrick Peterson and Tyrann Mathieu, and then Derek Stingley very recently. I mean, we could keep going down the list here. I mean, Grant Delpit. So for DBU to consistently live on, even under a new regime in Brian Kelly, I think is good news for the LSU faithful. One thing that I was really intrigued by when Brian Kelly took this job is not just, the resource, which is a big deal, but the access he has to talent. It's not to knock Notre Dame, it's not to knock South Bend, Indiana, but being in the boot. If you can just put a rope around the state, you have a pretty good shot at being able to have some really good rosters. I mean, Shelton Sampson. I mean, we go down the list here.
Year in, year out, the boot talent is what feeds the LSU program. When they're at their best, I know I said this earlier, but when they're at their best, They are landing that talent. They're keeping Alabama out. And you see when they dip, teams immediately come into Louisiana and try to take advantage of a weak, vulnerable LSU. But look at what they've done this year with Lance Hurd, Shelton Sampson, quarterback Ricky Collins, and safety Kylan Jackson. I mean, these guys are staying home. They're putting on for their hometown team, and they're going to bring LSU to the top. I mean, this is the type of talent that you bring in that we expected Brian Kelly to bring in when he arrived at LSU.
And those are big-time players that had options. Like, they could have gone to other big-time programs and played their college football, but say, no, we want to stay home. We want to be at our home state school. I think that's a big deal. And I think also these kids, I would imagine, looking for a reason to stay home, looking for a reason to be at LSU. And given what they had a season to go and what they weren't doing on the field, they didn't really have a reason to. They weren't going to get developed to the nth degree. And so with Brian Kelly, heading in the right direction for sure.
Yeah, the names that we showed up there on the screen, I mean, they could have punched their ticket to anywhere in the country.
Yep.
And they decided to stay home and play for Brian Kelly. So I think it's a great start when we talk about first-year head coaches for Brian Kelly. I don't want to say to turn it around, but there was just moments early on where it felt like, oh, he might not get it going.
Yeah.
And we've seen coaches not get it going in their first year, and sometimes it's hard to recover from that.
And they pivoted extremely well during the year. I mean, that was the thing for them early was, hey, they kind of fall behind in the first half. They kind of have trouble in that first and second quarter being able to get the offense revved up. And then total 180, they're playing for the SEC title at the end of the year. Actually, unbelievable.
They did enough to slow the kind of dysfunction they had in the beginning.
Yeah.
And I don't even think it's dysfunction. I think it's just the transition of moving on from a new head coach and playing some really tough competition at the beginning of their season. Because on paper, when they lost that Florida State game, you thought, you just lost to one of the worst Power 5, one of the worst ACC teams out there. Little did we know Florida State was going to almost make it to their conference championship this year and win 9 games. So it wasn't the loss that we thought it was at the beginning of the season. And Brian Kelly's done a magnificent job of recovering and landing a heck of a class. 2
programs that feel like they're very much so on the rise in Florida State and LSU. But LSU, with the access to talent, like we've been saying this whole segment, keep an eye on the Tigers, because right now they have the right guy steering the ship. I mean, Brian Kelly, for his career, when he came to LSU, won something crazy like 80% of his games. Like, just knows how to run a program.
Yeah.
So now have the guy steering the ship.
And he kind of has some of the handcuffs that he had on him at Notre Dame off when it comes to recruiting, because there's some academic standards there at Notre Dame that you have to overcome if you're Brian Kelly, and you can't recruit everybody in the country.
No, without a doubt.
It definitely narrows your focus when you're at Notre Dame, and he did a lot with less. Well, I shouldn't say less, but it makes it a little tougher to land the classes that he wants to land with some of the rigors of Notre Dame's academic standards there. So
Yeah, and sorry not to cut you off, but a lot of pressure now on Brian Kelly too, because all the excuses you had at Notre Dame of, well, hey, I don't have all the resources I need, I don't have as great of resources as the Bamas, Georgias, LSU's. How am I supposed to compete with them? Now all those excuses are gone, and so for him to have the success he had in his first year only raises the bar. But the school that he did come from, like you just mentioned, Notre Dame, hanging in there. They had the number 5 class going into today. We'll see where they're at right now currently. But Marcus Freeman's still doing a really good job in terms of hitting the recruiting trail hard. They were really hot in the summer on the recruiting trail. Right now in the consensus on 3 team ranks, we'll have to pull that up. But still a solid class.
I think they're
for
number
them.
7 right now.
Okay, so hanging around the top 10.
Yeah, now I don't want to come off, because for the last week I've been trying to tell you guys that Notre Dame's going to slip out of the top 5. At one point they were at number 4, then they were at number 5. Now we see them today at number 7. I don't want to say it, but I saw this coming.
Yeah.
If once Peyton Bowen didn't stick, it was potential free fall time for Notre Dame. Right now they fall from 5 to 7. We'll see if they can hang in the top 10 today. But Marcus Freeman, he's another one who things were getting squirrely for early on, and he kind of gathered the troops. They lose to Marshall. Their recruiting momentum stalls. Now, I do think that even though they turned it around and they had a successful season, and Marcus Freeman, that some of the heat is off of Marcus Freeman.
For sure.
They weren't able to rebound in recruiting. And I don't mean that their class fell apart. They have a great recruiting class. But it's the reason why they fell from 4 to 7. And maybe even further as the day goes on, it's because they had to play defense down the stretch. Notre Dame was not an aggressive team on the recruiting trail down the stretch because they had to hold on to what they had. They were kind of limited in what they could do. It was more important about holding on to what we got And the most important piece to hold on to is 5-star Peyton Bowen.
And to be fair, they had a lot of those pieces early on. I mean, they had Peyton Bowen, they had Ua-galele, they had Dalen Edwards.
Yeah,
all
he's
those
another
guys
one.
just kind of slipped through their fingers in the 11th hour. But not to, I guess if you're a Notre Dame fan, you're saying, man, I wish we could have hung on to some of those big-time players and just catapult our class even further. But when you look at it in retrospect, if they're able to have a top 10 class this season, they had a top 6 class last year, coming at number 6. This would be their first top 10 classes in back-to-back years since 2013 and 2014. So I think it just shows, like you said, how difficult it is to recruit and how impressive it is to have a class like that, in back-to-back years.
And hey, Notre Dame, they can go out and do it all again. They started really hot in 2023. They're going to start hot in 2024. But this time, I think Notre Dame won't struggle out of the gates early in the season, and they will continue to recruit well because that's what Marcus Freeman does. Marcus Freeman is one of the best head coach recruiters out there, coming from the assistant background, being young, tapping into what these players want to hear. He knows how to recruit, and he just needs the wins to back it up. And I think that next year around this time, I think Notre Dame will be a program that's surging rather than kind of slipping and sliding.
I was going to say, also, Marcus Freeman, it's his first time being a head coach. Like, we're talking about a lot of these guys being new coaches at new programs. Marcus Freeman getting the keys to a Ferrari in Notre Dame and saying, all right, go ahead and drive this car, don't crash, and figure it out, right? But for Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, is this kind of the start of a new Notre Dame? Because they got the new visit pictures. Doesn't feel kind of like the stuffy old Notre Dame with how they're doing things. In your mind, is this the beginning of a new Fighting Irish?
In one way or another, it's a new era. Because when you go from the Brian Kelly era, where he's definitely not a player's coach, to the Marcus Freeman era, where he's definitely a player's coach. There's a significant shift in the vibe of the program, in the feeling that you hear from the players. Now, whether or not they're as successful under Marcus Freeman will still yet to be told, but there's no doubt in my mind, yes, this is a different era for Notre Dame than they had been previously.
Without a doubt. Kind of bringing some new energy, some new juice. I mean, Brian Kelly was there for what felt like forever.
Yeah, and he had a good run. And he did some things, but at a certain point, I think for him and for the program, they needed some new blood, they needed some new juice, and they have that. And I think, Marcus Freeman is settled in, and I think the best is still yet to come from him.
Absolutely. When they look back on this signing day, they'll be frustrated. They lost some of those pieces. The Peyton Bowen loss, the flip to Oregon will obviously hurt.
The Keon Keeley loss.
It'll hurt.
Yeah,
it'll hurt
hurts
for a little bit. But when you look at the entire picture for Notre Dame fans, I think you'll look back and say, hey, first-year head coach, 8-4 season, still put together a top 10 class. You hear that? Beep, 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 beep. Simmons scoop coming in hot for you right now. Chad, what we got, my man?
I hinted Auburn wasn't done. They've already flipped 4-star edge Keldrick Falk. This time, Ohio State cornerback Kyan Lee has flipped to Auburn University. One-time Georgia commit for me. He's a local guy for me from right there outside of Atlanta, Cedar Grove High School, Ellenwood, Georgia. I think he was kind of born to play in the SEC. He has that dog in him. He's a physical corner. Good ball skills, loves to hit, loves to play physical. He's the kind of guy that Auburn wants on the back end of their defense. Again, two-time state champion, visited Auburn late. The new staff made him a priority, has a good connection with Zach Etheridge. So again, Auburn, flip alert. They win a battle, go head-to-head with Ohio State and flip Kyan Lee.
Chad, they've been there for like 15 minutes. Hugh Freeze is still getting the keys to all the facilities. How is Auburn making some movements on National Signing Day?
Oh, and should I say, they might not be done. But let's just wait. That's for another day, another segment. But we'll see what happens. No, but they're doing a great job. Hugh Freeze, he understands the landscape in the SEC, being the former coach at Ole Miss. He understands how important it is to recruit in your own backyard. And I've said it before. I've been doing this for 18, 19 years. Blessed to do it and love it. But the thing is, when Auburn's been great, they've had a lot of players from the state of Georgia on that roster. Georgia talent's very important to Auburn. They can do great and do good in Alabama. They'll win some battles, lose some battles against Nick Saban and the other in-state school. But they've got to do well in Georgia if they want to compete in the SEC. And Hugh Freeze is off to a great start there.
We got a quack.
Quack alert. So Chad is dropping some knowledge on us. we're making sure we're tracking with everything. So we're listening to Chad. Chad, what just happened in the good place of Eugene, Oregon today?
Oh, we started hitting on this about, 30, 45 minutes ago.
Let's
Dalen
roll, baby.
Austin going from not Long Beach to Baton Rouge, but Long Beach heading north up to Eugene, Oregon. So a big one here. I mean, at one time about a week or so ago, and really Dalen's narrative has been all along he's going to sign in February, in the late period. So for not only Oregon to flip him, but to flip him and convince him to sign early and end everything. Let's make it official. You're an Oregon Duck. I mean, can anybody have a better day than what Dan Lanning's doing right now, going down to Long Beach to get the Roadrunner, Dalen Austin, a high-profile, 4-star corner, athlete, length, checks a lot of boxes, and flip him from LSU.
You're seeing them do it on the offensive side of the ball, on the defensive side of the ball, and most Oregon fans out in Eugene are not even awake yet.
Yeah, everyone's still getting their Starbucks coffee,
Right.
getting rolling, and finding, oh, you know what? What's under the Christmas tree? An early couple of presents in the form of some big-time recruits. Now, so Chad, you said he was thinking about signing in February. What goes into making a kid decide, you know what, I know today, I don't need to wait till February, I can speed up my decision, make it today. How does that even happen?
I think it's been in his mind for sure. It may be more in his mind than maybe he led on. Obviously, the narrative he has been kind of preaching that he was going to wait. He just went and visited Louisville this weekend. He had other OVs potentially in January. But I think, obviously, Oregon, they got him on campus. The new staff has made him a priority there at Oregon over the last year. He has connections there. He knows people there. And again, I think this didn't happen just overnight. Oregon's been a school trending kind of behind the scenes for some time. He gave it some thought. And I really think down deep, Dalen's known he was likely signing earlier. But, hey, he wants to play the games. He's been talking about Miami on social media this morning, been talking about Louisville. He didn't talk about Oregon, and that's where he just signed just a few minutes ago.
I can't wait to see these updated rankings, JD.
Yeah,
Oregon on the move, man. They are getting some frequent flyer miles out of this one.
And 2 big gets in the secondary. And we remember what Oregon did a season ago. They weren't very good in the secondary.
Right.
I mean, they had an Achilles heel in that team, in that program that kept them from playing for a Pac-12 title. You flash back to that Washington game, and Michael Penix Jr. is back there playing 7-on-7 Uncle Rico style, just slinging it all over the yard. And so for Oregon, they had 2 big-time signees that I think could have a chance to play pretty early in both Dalen Austin and Peyton Bowen, who come from a high level of competition at the high school level.
If you're Oregon and you look at the ability level and the talent level of Pac-12 quarterback play, the secondary has to be your most important recruiting position, right? Because in that league right now, that's where the best quarterbacks lie.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to go week in, week out, whether you're playing Utah, whether you're playing USC, whether you're playing, I mean, even Colorado is going to have some decent quarterback play coming up pretty soon. So if you are the Ducks, you got to love the fact that you're waking up to all this news, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and they might not be done yet. The #1 defensive lineman in America, David Hicks, is most likely, because everything changes, going to make his decision on Friday.
Yeah, that's a bad man
David
right there.
Hicks is currently committed to Texas A&M. Chad has his hand up.
Let's ride.
It's no breaking news. I just wanted to go ahead and change my RPM to Oregon for David Hicks and everybody else that's announcing in the next couple of days.
Let's go.
I'm betting on Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks.
Are you really ready to change your prediction?
No, I'm really not. I'm just saying they have so much momentum right now.
You're thinking
it's hard
about
to
it.
bet against those guys right now, and we know they're very much in this with David Hicks.
It also shows that this didn't, like I said earlier, this didn't happen just now. There's been a lot of action taking place behind the scenes to set up a day like today. You don't just pick up the phone and say, hey, Dalen Austin, you want to flip? Hey, David Hicks, you want to flip today? There's been work being put in for weeks, if not months, to make a day happen the way it has unfolded today for the Oregon Ducks.
And what does that say about Oregon's staff they have in place and the direction they're headed of this program? I mean, you think about Chip Kelly, and not to knock Chip Kelly, did some phenomenal things there, but the things that people say about Chip Kelly today and why he wasn't going to be, in a lot of people's minds, a candidate for the Auburn job is what he didn't do on the recruiting trail. Dan Lanning and his staff, by evidence of what we see today on National Signing Day, they're making some noise.
This is why you see so many teams try to hire off the Saban coaching tree. And I know Dan Lanning came from Georgia, but he was under Kirby Smart, who implements the Saban theology, whatever you want to call it, methodology.
Yeah.
And Dan Lanning has implemented that successfully in Oregon. They have the resources out there. They have the territory because you can dip into California. You can dip into Texas like they have heavily today. You can go into Louisiana. You can do these things if you're Oregon. And Dan Lanning has implemented what was going on at Georgia, what's been going on at Alabama, and he's applying it to Oregon, and he's finding a lot of success early on in his first year.
He's building what they call a program.
Yes.
With a U there, with a program. We're still waiting to get the final top 10, not final, but final after the latest commitment. Looks like
I got it in front of me.
Beautiful.
I got it in front of me. You might not have it in front of you, but here, we'll start at number 5. Texas still sits at 5. We haven't had any changes to the top 5. Alabama, Georgia, Miami, Ohio State, Texas. Then you have Oregon sitting at 6. They just moved from 8 to 6 with their latest commitment. LSU sits at 7. Notre Dame sits at 8. Oklahoma at 9, and the Gators are hanging on at number 10 to that top 10 class.
Josh, if the Gators fall out of the top 10, what would that say for Gator fans? Because that was kind of a big, exciting factor for Gator fans when they got Billy Napier and they saw the team photo with all the blue polos and got Katie Nolan. Like, there was a lot of juice around Gator recruiting early, and to kind of have this slow decline on signing day, how concerned should Gator fans be?
I mean, it's a little disappointing. I think that the Gators have a good class. They did very well in the trenches, and they have a very good secondary class. I think both of those were major needs for UF. But if they don't finish in the top 10, it's disappointing because, JD, they brought Billy Napier in there to close the gap on programs like Georgia and Alabama and LSU. And in year one, when you get the benefit of the doubt, we're talking year one coaches right now. We've seen programs get off to worse starts in year one, like a Miami who's sitting at number 3 or 4 in the team rankings. But if Florida drops out, that's disappointing because you wanted to see Billy Napier come in and start to close the gap. Start to at least try to close the gap. And if you look at what Georgia's bringing in and what Alabama's bringing in, what LSU's bringing in, not to mention the teams coming in like Texas, that's their competition right now. And Florida just is not closing the gap with the class that they're bringing in this year, but there are some bright spots. Jaden Rashada, Eugene Wilson, some of these guys, Kelby Collins on the defensive line, some of these guys are going to come in and make a big impact for Florida, but you really wanted to see Billy Napier load up in year one, and they have sort of just kind of fizzled out to the finish here.
No, I think you said that perfectly. A top 10 class, if you're hanging out top 10, I mean, so many programs across the country would give their left arm and their special teams unit to be able to have a top 10 class.
Yeah, plus Gator fans,
it's not good enough.
No, it's not good enough. And Gator fans ran Dan Mullen out of town for finishing 8 through 12 during his tenure there. That was not good enough. They said we need somebody to come in and recruit better than that. And to finish 10 or 11 is a slight disappointment.
Now, it's only year one. How much alarm is there for this to be the first class? Is this, okay, we're going to give you some time? I mean, obviously no one's saying Billy Napier's on the hot seat. That's not what we're here to talk about. But with, the trajectory of future recruiting for him to be a top 10 in the first year, is that something to where, okay, we'll let it slide, or not okay with us, we need to do better with these resources?
If you're Florida and you've been in the coaching churn that they've been in since Will Muschamp, you have to give Billy Napier time. And I don't think anybody's putting him on the hot seat, but it doesn't get any easier from here. Year one is when you get the benefit of the doubt. Now, the Gators won, 6 games this year?
6 games.
6 games
Tough
this
bowl
year.
game.
Next, they got the benefit of the doubt. They pulled a top 10 class. Next year, they will not get the benefit of the doubt. It's more important for Billy Napier to go out there and win ball games if he's going to recruit better. And it doesn't get easier because you didn't exactly sign the class that you expected to sign. I mean, you thought that they were going to be knocking on the door of a top 5 class. Here they are battling to hang in the top 10. Very solid, like I said, defensive back class. I like what they're doing in the trenches. There's some important gets there for the Gators. But from an overall perspective, I don't think they did enough to close the gap on some of their SEC rivals.
No, without a doubt. And Florida's a team that I think we're going to keep an eye on here as we keep moving forward. But Miami, the in-state school that they're kind of going back and forth with, it's been a lot of Super Mario versus Billy. That's kind of the title fight.
It has been. It's been really entertaining.
Yeah.
It's been awfully entertaining to watch from kind of my seat up on this perch. Napier versus Mario versus Napier. We've seen them throw some absolute haymakers on the recruiting trail. It started with Jaden Rashada committing to Miami. I'm sorry. He commits to Miami. We know it was a real NIL battle there. John Ruiz beating his chest. Gator Collective going back to lick their wounds. Well, they circle the wagons. They come back, and Florida flips Jaden Rashada. He has not signed yet, but they did flip him. He has their commitment, but Miami is the big winner here with this battle.
Absolutely.
They get Samson Okunlola. That was a 5-star battle for the offensive tackle out of Massachusetts. Chad Simmons did a great job of covering that recruitment at one point. Florida was heavily trending. Miami was trending early on, but then Florida gets him on campus for an official visit, and it felt like the Gators had taken the momentum from Miami for Okunlola, but the last minute he commits to Miami. Then it moved on. The battle went to go to Mark Fletcher, St. Thomas Aquinas running back.
Yep.
He decommits from Ohio State 4 days after taking an unofficial visit to Florida. So the feeling coming out of that decommitment about 6 weeks ago now was Florida's in the driver's seat. They get him on campus twice for visits, but the final weekend before signing day, follow those visits because Mark Fletcher was in Coral Gables, and all the excitement and momentum that Florida had just kind of vaporized. Mark Fletcher commits to Miami. The battles are not done. I don't expect it to, just because Mario Cristobal came out on top this year, I still think that Billy Napier and that staff have a lot of wins within them, and it's going to be a battle that we continue to watch between these two first-year head coaches.
And one battle that could potentially, not to speculate too much, but I'll just say this: Cormani McClain has not signed, and Florida was the perceived favorite before he did commit to Miami. So we'll say that one's still kind of an open battle.
Florida has historically done very well in the Lakeland area. For much of his recruitment, it seemed like in the end, Cormani would settle on the Florida Gators. Miami comes in, changes those plans. He commits to Miami in October, and things have been silent since then. Eerily quiet when it comes to Cormani McClain, and of course, we find out why. Well, this morning, his mother tweets out that Cormani McClain will not be signing his letter of intent today. We do not know if he plans to tomorrow or Friday, or maybe take this thing all the way clear to the February signing date. Those are all storylines that we'll have to keep watching.
And not to discredit the importance of Cormani McClain, but even without Cormani McClain, let's just say this thing just goes extremely left for Miami and Cormani goes to Colorado or Florida, wherever he goes. This is still a really good class that Mario Cristobal has put together with a 5-7 product on the field. I mean, Mark Fletcher, like you mentioned, a guy from American Heritage who has just been an absolute dog at the high school level and will be a guy that could potentially get some carries in the early going for Miami. How much does this impress you for Miami to have the class they have right now, even with a 5-7 season?
It's incredibly impressive because without this recruiting class, it really puts Mario Cristobal and the Miami coaching staff behind the 8 ball. But because you infuse so much talent, Francis Malagoa, Samson Okunlola in the trenches, Ruben Bain on the defensive line. I mean, they got guys that are going to be impact players that are going to improve this roster mightily as soon as they step on campus, and they're not done. I'm going to go to Chad Simmons, but we're talking about Cormani McClain potentially flipping, but Miami, not to say that they don't want to sign Cormani McClain, and in addition to Damari Brown and possibly Conrad Hussey. What are you hearing on those two right now in terms of where they stand with the Miami Hurricanes?
For Miami, I'm hearing kind of split. I'm hearing a little bit more about Florida State with Hussey. Miami's still involved. He is right now still committed to Penn State. So he could end up there as well. But I think I would lean towards him ending somewhere in his home state of Florida with either Florida State or Miami. I do like where they're at with Damari Brown. Obviously, teammates with Mark Fletcher at American Heritage and Plantation. His brother, a UCF transfer, has committed to Miami over the weekend. I think that would be just a better feeling to play with family for a couple of years at the school that you grew up. Your dad played there. He's a Miami legacy. Going into this visit over the weekend to Miami, the buzz and maybe the school trending was Alabama. Florida State's kind of lurking. They're hanging around. But it seems like if anybody can take him away from Miami, it would be Alabama. But I'm hearing over the last really 3 to 4 days, Miami's been the team to beat, and I think in the next hour and a half to 2 hours, they're in a good spot to close here with Damari Brown.
Now, do you think that has anything to do with Cormani McClain, or do you think Miami would take those players in addition to Cormani McClain?
I mean, Miami would take those guys in a heartbeat. Cristobal knows how important, this class is for him, is what he's trying to build there in Miami. One thing I want to point out about what he's doing in this class is I love the guys he's keeping home. I think one of the biggest commits in this class, when all's said and done, 2, 3, 4 years from now, will be Ruben Bain. I mean, he's a guy that I call just kind of an old school kid, a football player, a 4-time state champion at Miami Central.
He's a winner.
He told me that he will go in there and change the culture, change the locker room. He'll become an immediate, I think, leader in Coral Gables for Mario Cristobal. And I love what they're doing in the local area. Nate Joseph, an explosive playmaker from Miami Edison. Obviously Mark Fletcher in the backyard in Plantation. If they can get Damari Brown, American heritage. Cristobal himself knows. He's from Miami Columbus, as is Alex Mirabal, the O-line coach. He played at Miami. He won 2 titles at Miami. He knows how important Miami is to Miami, how important South Florida is, the old Liberty City is to the Miami Hurricanes. Nobody knows it better than Mario Cristobal. He wants to put a rope around that, a net around that area from West Palm down, and own that area. If he does that, he keeps Alabama out, Georgia out, LSU out, and wins head-to-head against Napier and Mike Norvell. Miami will be back.
Howard Schnellenberger talking about roping off the state of Miami, which is, of course, how Miami became the U, and then Jimmy Johnson doing what he did there. So there's a lot of history around that program, and I think people, college football fans in general that aren't in Tallahassee or in Gainesville, are hoping and praying the U can get back to being relevant. Chad, I want to get your thoughts on this. Why is the state of Florida so crucial to the college football landscape in general, not just these schools?
Because it's one of the top states out there. I mean, obviously it's a big state. When you talk about the top 3 or 4, it's the same ones. It's Florida. Now, Georgia's now become that one. Texas and California. Florida's been there forever, one of the best. I think just from a skilled athlete standpoint, Florida's probably the best in the country as far as numbers when it comes to corners, track guys playing wide receiver, guys that are just versatile athletes. And that's why so many schools can go in there and cherry pick. There's so many great players, specifically down there at the American Heritage, St. Thomas Aquinas, Chaminade Madonna, Miami Central, Miami Northwestern. There's so many top programs just in that little pocket down there in about a 45 to hour minute span. If Cristobal can do some damage there and win most of those battles, he'll make Miami relevant again pretty quickly.
No, without a doubt. And all the access to talent, I think, is why we keep an eye on these 3 schools so closely. But one school that I don't know that we've talked nearly enough about, Josh, in this whole recruiting cycle is the Florida State Seminoles. I mean, a school that on paper, the best record of the 3. I mean, they've had a 9-win season this year. Mike Norvell's got that thing headed in the right direction. Do we need to be paying closer attention to the Seminoles?
Yeah, Mike Norvell does it through a combination of high school recruiting and transfer portal. And right now, they are cooking in the transfer portal. But on the recruiting trail from the high school level, I think there's some more improvement needed under Mike Norvell if he's going to take this program from a 9-win team perennially to like a 10, 11-win team. Florida State most notably lost Travis Hunter last year, Keldrick Falk this year. These are kind of the battles that Florida State needs to hold on to down the stretch. Now, they have a very good class. Hakeem Williams comes in, a major need. Florida State hasn't been able to pull in many playmakers at the wide receiver position. It's why they had to go to the transfer portal last year and grab 4 wide receivers, really just remake the entire room. But this year, Hakeem Williams, 5-star wide receiver out of South Florida, signs with Florida State. He is now, well, I think he makes it official here in a couple moments. I have no doubt about it. They are actually they are handing out Hakeem Williams Florida State T-shirts at his signing day ceremony today.
Okay, so he's not on flip.
There's no drama there. Although Florida State did lose their top commitment on defense once again this year. Last year, Travis Hunter. This year, it's edge rusher Keldrick Falk, who flips to Auburn. So all in all, Florida State's done a good job. They flipped Brock Glenn from Ohio State late in the cycle as their QB. They did not have a QB commitment after Chris Parson flipped to Mississippi State. Really, I think that was in the summertime. So most schools have their quarterback signed, sealed, and delivered. Florida State makes a late add of Brock Glenn. They're recruiting well at the high school level, but I think the moral of the story here is they got to get better.
Yeah, currently the number 19 class in the On3 consensus team recruiting rankings, which is good, but when you're going up against Miami, you go up against Florida on the recruiting trail, like it's kind of what you said, it's so much about who you're competing against.
Yes.
And so to be able to take it up a notch, and I think the on-field product will help propel that, but for Mike Norvell and company, good, but maybe still a little bit to be desired.
Yeah, you want to balance out the success that they're having in the transfer portal with the high school level. I know Mike Norvell's goal every year is not to sign 12 or 13 transfer portal prospects. It's to recruit the high school level better and supplement your class with 3 or 4 really good players from the transfer portal. I know a lot of Florida State fans will say, well, Josh, Florida State doesn't need to recruit the high school level better because look at what they're doing in the transfer portal. Well, don't argue with me. Argue with Mike Norvell because Mike Norvell is offering Quay Rusal. He's offering all these players, Peyton Bowen, all these great players that we're talking about today. It's not as if Mike Norvell's saying, I don't need them.
Yeah.
He is absolutely spending time offering them and recruiting them up until the point where they're no longer interested. So all that to say, Florida State needs to get better at recruiting the high school level.
Josh, I want to ask you this before we move on. What is the strategy then if you're Florida State? Because you have Miami really playing the NIL game super effectively. You have Florida who's allocating a lot of resources. And though they're slipping back a little bit on signing day, had a strong push for a top 5 class at one point in time. What is the strategy if you're Florida State to be able to get to the top of those top 3?
The strategy is stay patient. You've stayed patient this entire time through the first 3 years of Mike Norvell's tenure. And each year over year, he's gotten a little bit better. He hasn't improved at the rate of which FSU fans would like him to improve. But look at the record. They win 2 games. They win 5 games. They win 9 games. So all of that coincides with slightly better recruiting in each year as well. So I think right now, where Florida State's at, they don't really have a choice. They're on the climb with Mike Norvell. They need to be patient. The results are there. They're just not happening as quickly as Florida State fans would hope. But heading into year 4, things are improving, and they just need to stay the course.
Slowly but surely building the thing from the ground up. We talk about it. Mike Norvell having the right language around his program. We're going to build this thing internally, eventually get the results that we're looking for.
2 things can be true at the same time. 1, Florida State is improving under Mike Norvell. And 2, Florida State still needs to recruit better at the high school level under Mike Norvell. Those 2 things can be true at the same time.
Absolutely. And so while we're taking a deep breath, you're talking about the Florida schools. Florida kind of sliding back a little bit. Miami waiting to see what Cormani McClain does here. Doesn't look like he's signed just yet. We'll make sure we got you covered here on the On3 Recruiting Signing Day show, so make sure you're locked in with us. Let's take a quick look at this top 10 and what we got right now. Again, don't get too tied to this picture because it's going to change. It's going to shake up, I'm sure, here in the next few hours. But here's where the top 10 stands right now. If we could throw that up on the screen here whenever we get that up there. We got Alabama at 1, got Georgia at 2. You got Miami still hanging in there at 3, Ohio State at 4, Notre Dame at 5, Josh. The Fighting Irish still have a
making a move back into the top 5, but we'll see how when the dust settles at the end of the day. If Notre Dame can hang around 5 or 6, I think that'd be a huge win for them on signing day.
Oh, it'd be enormous. And then you also have Texas there at 6. Florida has slid back to that 10 spot. Let's see here. These rankings are changing the whole time, Josh, to make sure we're getting the right rankings here for us. But yeah, a lot of movement here within the top 10. Okay, we got Florida at 10, Texas at 5, Notre Dame is at 8. So those
Notre Dame continues to slide. So that's what I expect. I was going to say, if Notre Dame was still sitting around 5 or 6, that'd be a big win. But Notre Dame's sitting at number 8 right now. That's about where I thought they would be without a Peyton Bowen.
There we go.
They need to hang on and finish in the top 8. I don't know. Right now I think Oklahoma obviously has the ability to move up because they still have David Hicks on the board. That's a big piece. But Notre Dame and Florida, to me, look like they're vulnerable right now to be bounced out of the top 10 only because there's not a ton of parts left on the board for them to add. There's only parts to potentially flip from them. But
yeah,
Florida
exactly.
hanging in there at number 10, 9 Oklahoma, 8 Notre Dame.
A lot of movement. You can't tell. We're keeping pace here with the rankings. They are changing as we speak. So appreciate you locking in with us. If you have not yet liked the video or subscribed to the On3 YouTube channel,
What are you doing?
now is the time to do so. Okay, National Signing Day, we got you covered. You saw those rankings. You saw they're moving, they're shifting, they're shaking. It's like a big game of Jenga as kids are flipping, committing, putting pen to paper. We got you covered right here. So again, make sure you like the video. We're pushing towards 500. Let's get there. Make sure you subscribe. All right, want to make sure that you're locked in with us with everything going on here in the wild world that is college football recruiting. Let's talk about the transfer portal, huh? What do you say? Talk a little bit about the crazy world that is the portal, as that has now also impacted signing day and how that is continuing to evolve. How much, in your mind, just start blanket statement, how much has the transfer portal impacted what National Signing Day is today?
For fans, it's become the number one excuse when they miss on a prospect. Oh, it's okay. We're just going to go to the transfer portal for now. So fans love the idea of, hey, if we miss on the trail, we can always make it back in the transfer portal, which is not always true. There's a ton of competition in the transfer portal because guess what? Every team in America is going to see how many spots they have left after signing day, and they're going to go to the transfer portal and take a look, and they're going to compete for all those players. So if you think that your team is going to have an easier route going to the portal than the high school level, you're wrong. The other thing that the portal's done to signing day is it has taken away the sleeper pick. What used to happen down the stretch was say we were just talking about Florida State. Say Florida State had 2 available scholarships down the road, and they wanted to sign an offensive lineman and defensive lineman, and both those options went elsewhere. Well, guess what they might do? They might have a guy on their board that they really liked during the spring that they just couldn't offer, and they'll take a flyer on that high school prospect, or they'll go after this sleeper pick that nobody really recruited, but they saw something in him that they liked. That's no more. Now coaches are taking those extra scholarships, they're putting them in their pocket, and they're going to the transfer portal with them. So it's kind of sad to see that some of the opportunities are being taken away from high school players. We've seen it down the stretch at signing day where a team like an Alabama might offer somebody off the radar just because they liked something that they saw on film and they thought, hey, maybe if we get him on campus and develop him, maybe in 2 or 3 years he'll be a contributor for us. But now they're going for instant gratification. There's no longer these sleeper picks at the last minute, and it's mainly, hey, let's pocket these scholarship and let's go to the transfer portal.
And one thing that you're hearing a lot is people saying, well, signing day doesn't mean as much anymore. Signing day is not as important as it was. I would beg to differ because you look at the Georgia Bulldogs and how they've consistently been able to build within the trenches and build their program from the high school level. You don't have to go to the portal, but it seems like a lot of these programs are able to lean on the portal and revamp quickly. And
there's some reasons why you don't want to go to the portal, and there's some reasons why you do. You do want to go to the portal to get somebody that's going to be an instant impact, that's going to have experience, and that's going to come in and contribute right away. You don't want to go to the portal for other reasons. One, I think it's more expensive to go to the portal. We've been talking a lot about NIL. Well, I think outside of a few positions like quarterback and maybe running back, I think it's more expensive to go to the portal and try to land a proven player because there's proof of concept there, and they want fair market value. But if you can land them out of high school, you have them for more years. A lot of transfers are 1 year, maybe 2 years. Yes, there are some 3-year transfers, but primarily you're looking at 1 or 2 year transfers. Now you get a high school athlete on campus, he redshirts, now you have him for 3, 4, 5 years. That's going to help implement the culture. Because he knows what the coaches are expecting, he knows what the standard is in the program, and it's going to rub off on other players. So there's positive and there's negatives, but you want to find that balance if you're a team. And some teams like a Georgia have found their balance. They're not taking any.
And it's one of those things, too, where you see these programs, especially with new coaches, like, hey, I don't have to now wait my turn and recruit, 3 to 4 to 5 5-stars and eventually get my base. Then in the 3rd year, I'll be okay to start winning some games. It's like, no, you hit the portal. Make sure you're bringing the right guys with you. Let's go win some games in year 1. And we've seen some programs do that really effectively. USC kind of being, I think, the blueprint that we're going to see a lot of these new coaches follow. Want to throw it over to you, Chad, Director of Recruiting for On3. How have you seen this impact the high school game when it comes to these kids making their decisions? Because it seems like okay, if I'm not happy after I make my decision on signing day, I can just hit the portal and make sure I get a good situation the next time around. Does that, in some case, take the pressure off of these kids with getting it right the first time in your mind?
Yeah, in that aspect, yes. I think it does give them somewhat an out if they're not happy, they don't fit the culture maybe, they have issues with maybe depth chart or getting playing time, whatever their issue may be. And then on the other side, the high school side, it really hurts those guys that are on those fringe type kids, man, that are typically getting those late last minute offers when schools miss late and they miss 2 or 3 or have 1 or 2 spots left. They'll sign that 24th and 25th kid, offer him late in January, sometimes even to February into March, late. Those kids now aren't getting offered at all because those schools are now setting spots aside to sign portal kids, and more spots as far as more teams more than others, but the majority of most schools I say now in the country are keeping a spot or 2, if not more, open for the right fit portal-wise now, and it's kind of hurting those, I don't even want to say lower, it's those fringe guys, the G5, Power 5, FBS guys, those fringe guys are being left out.
And for these coaches, too, it used to be a matter of, I know you never burn a bridge with a recruit, but you can now recruit a kid up into high school and, okay, doesn't pick your school. That's all right. Keep that relationship. Make sure you leave on good terms. Hey, so happy for you. And then when he does jump in the portal, I promise you, for a high school recruit, they're remembering that. Has that changed the way that coaches approach recruiting as well, Chad?
A little bit. You have to be careful because it trickles down, man. I mean, you have to keep. I think this whole world revolves around relationships. No matter what you do, for a profession, it's about who you know, how respected you are, the relationships that you've established on different levels. So, yeah, I do think that it's critical about how you communicate with a high school coach, how transparent you are, how genuine you are about recruiting his kid, what's going to happen, what you expect to happen, and what could happen. Because, and just kind of go one step further on this transfer portal and kind of how the impact it's had on recruiting on the high school side is that I've even had, kids, parents, trainers reach out to me that they want to commit earlier now, maybe, before that December 1, mid-November, to keep their NIL value higher because once the portal goes open and those other guys come into the conversation, they're now competing with maybe, if they're a high school left tackle, a college guy that has 2 years experience from Wisconsin at left tackle. And maybe now those high school guys slide down, the portal guys rise up, and their value becomes less. So it's definitely on multiple levels, man, how the portal has affected high school recruiting.
Absolutely wild.
Yeah,
absolutely
chain
wild.
reaction, and of course it does because you're talking about roster spots, and when it comes to recruiting, the payoff of signing a top recruit is he comes in and makes an instant impact, and everybody wants that in today's football, and the transfer portal also provides that. So it's a kind of a natural chain reaction that we're seeing due to the portal that is their effect on recruiting.
We're seeing more and more of it is just today's modern college football, NIL, transfer portal, but signing day is still where you got to build from, and the Georgia Bulldogs, I think, are the best example of that. What do you say we talk about the Dogs a little bit?
Let's do it.
Number 2 class in the country. Again, all these things are changing as we go on, but Georgia locked into that 2 spot.
I don't think their spot's going to change.
Yeah.
I think Georgia is pretty solid in that 2 spot right now, and they could add more. But I think right now, when we talk about the Georgia Bulldogs, I mean, you look at what they're doing on the defensive line. Samuel Mpimba, 5-star edge out of IMG. We got Damon Wilson trending heavily to Georgia as we speak. He's going to make his decision here this afternoon. He's a 5-star edge out of Venice, Florida. And then tomorrow, as if the Bulldogs need any more help in the trenches, Jordan Hall, 4-star defensive lineman out of Jacksonville, is set to make his decision. And according to Chad Simmons, we think it's going to be Georgia.
If Chad Simmons is calling it, if it's on the RPM for Chad Simmons, I'm trusting it. One thing that's interesting about Georgia, when you look at this 2023 class, 23 commits as of this morning. 9 of those guys are already enrolled, Josh. Is that just kind of the way that Kirby Smart does things? Because to be in the college weight room, to get used to college life, we talk about it a lot. I mean, that's a really big deal to have that many guys from this class already on campus.
I think it's what top recruits do these days. If you're a top recruit, you are most likely going to enroll early. Now, there's a couple exceptions. There's some players that play football, that play baseball.
Yeah.
Baseball's a spring sport in high school, so they're going to maybe stay on for their spring senior season. Also, players that run track. Track is also a spring sport. So you see some, and this is why today Georgia's not done. I'm going to throw it over to Chad Simmons. There's 2 names that are going to be announcing in February that are on Georgia's board that could have a major impact, and that is 5-star tight end Deuce Robinson, the #1 tight end in the nation, and the #1 athlete in the nation, Nicholas Harbor. Georgia's involved in both. Where do they stand with the Dogs?
Yeah, I was just texting with Deuce just now. I mean, there's been some rumblings about him maybe signing early. He said absolutely not.
Oh, wow.
He don't know where that stuff, you know how his fan base is wanting to just make stuff up and try to create a narrative. But no, he is not signing until February 1st. As you said, he's a baseball kid, Deuce Robinson, likely to be drafted somewhere later on this summer in the MLB draft. But he will sign with the school first. And I think it comes down to 3 schools, Georgia, Texas, and USC. He has taken an official visit to Alabama. I don't see them true as a contender right now. He could go take an OV to Oregon, which we know is the hottest team on the planet, right now. He could literally take a visit down the road to Arizona State, too, with Kenny Dillingham in there as the new head coach in the offensive mind. But I do like where Georgia's at right now during the early signing period for the 5-star tight end from Pinnacle in the Phoenix area. Just what they do tight end-wise, I think kind of speaks for itself with Darnell Washington, Brock Bauer, and of course Oscar Delp coming in and other guys behind him this year with Pierce Sperlin in the class and, Lawson Lucky. So that room is getting better and better and better. And I like where Georgia's at again for Deuce right now. With Nicholas Harbor, right now I think there's other schools ahead of Georgia. I'm not sure if Georgia will or will not get an OV from Harbor. He talked about that potentially in December. I was there for the state championship games. And right now I think still Michigan, Maryland, and South Carolina are the 3 schools. There's been some talks about LSU, maybe Miami, a little chatter about Georgia. But I think really it comes down to the main 3 that have already gotten him on campus for OVs. Michigan, Maryland, South Carolina. There's been talk about him going back for unofficials to at least 2 of those schools, South Carolina and Michigan, in January. But I think obviously he's the track phenom. Deuce, baseball star. Nick, track guy. So he's looking at both those guys looking at both baseball and football for Deuce, track and football for Harbor.
Yeah, I like Michigan for Harbor. I don't know why, but it just seems like Michigan's been very quiet this cycle, and it seems like their 5-star is going to come from Nicholas Harbor. I could be wrong on that. I've just felt like throughout this cycle, I feel like Nicholas Harbor could end up at Michigan, but we'll see what Georgia does. I mean, Georgia could turn up the heat. I mean, I think it'll also come down to how many spots they feel they have remaining. How many do they want to take in this class for UGA? And when the dust settles tomorrow, after we see what happens with Damon Wilson and Jordan Hall, Georgia can reassess. They can take a deep breath. They're going to have the month of January to fill any remaining needs. And Nicholas Harbor, he's a Swiss Army knife. He could fill a couple needs for you.
Absolute Swiss Army knife. Nicholas Harbor, a guy that you would imagine will have some impact on the field sooner rather than later, just with his giftedness athletically, like he's a track star, but also maybe he plays tight end, maybe he plays edge rusher. So much he can do for you on the field and likely do for you on the field a little bit earlier. Charles Power, Director of Scouting and Rankings, gave us his instant impact freshman from this class. Going to throw it to Charles now and hear what he has to say in relation to the 2023 studs.
One thing we really want to know is who's going to make plays on the college football field next year. So we decided to go through and kind of pick a handful of prospects that we view as instant impact players on Saturdays next fall. And I think some of this depends on the situation they're going into, but also most of these prospects are 5-star types, top 50, top 100 types who are really talented and have that ability to make an impact within the next year. So first off, we have Caleb Downs, the Alabama safety, just advanced mentally. This guy who is going to come in ready to play. I mean, his brother's going to be drafted in the NFL. The dad played in the NFL. He just knows what is expected of him. Caleb Downs, I would not be surprised at all to see him starting early at safety at Alabama and being a 3-year starter in Tuscaloosa. Texas is losing Bijan Robinson to the NFL draft this year, and they're replacing a former 5-star with another 5-star, Cedric Baxter, out of Orlando. Cedric Baxter is really ready to go in terms of his skill set. He is big at over 6'1", around 220 pounds. Very good senior season. A guy who can do everything you want in the pass game, which fits Steve Sarkisian's scheme really to a T. I think you'll have a little bit of a challenge from Jonathan Brooks at Texas, but I would be pretty surprised if Cedric Baxter was not getting significant carries as a freshman, if not the primary ball carrier for what should be a good offense at Texas. So I had a chance to see Peter Woods in person at the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game practices, and I came away thinking that he probably is one of the more developed and ready to go defensive linemen in the cycle. I think when you look at what Clemson's losing on the defensive front this year, they're going to have to replace guys like Brian Brzee. Would not be surprised at all to see Peter Woods come in and play as a freshman at Clemson. Another thing to go with just his level of development is the fact that he can kind of move all around the defensive line. When we were at those practices, he was lining up at defensive end, at defensive tackle, over the center. And I think so he can do a lot of different things. It has a lot of versatility and can really play, as a run defender and probably most importantly in passing down situations. So I would not be surprised to see Peter Woods making plays at Clemson next fall. Alabama has to replace everything pass rusher Will Anderson, and they have a bevy of options on their roster. No shortage of options, but I would not be surprised to see Keon Keeley get on the field as a freshman, just kind of given his size at close to 6'6", 250 pounds, his ability to play the run while also being a prolific high school pass rusher. I think he's one that when you're looking at the edge position, along with Deshaun Womack, Keon Keeley's just level of development, along with a potential need there at Alabama to play opposite Dallas Turner. I think Keeley sees the field at least in a rotational role as a freshman, and could potentially continue to grow into a more serious role as Alabama plays throughout their season and gets into SEC play. It's always hard to project who's going to play as freshmen, but that's kind of our best early guess. And some of this, I guess, we'll continue to track as we're going to get to continue to evaluate these prospects through the National All-Star games and kind of see how things work out during spring practice for early enrollees and then into fall camp. But that would be the group that I would tab as the most likely to make an impact as freshmen next fall.
So Alabama also likely will have a couple of high-impact freshmen. Charles Power, as always, bringing the director of scouting and rankings, scouting and rankings for On3. Chad Simmons, director of recruiting for On3, who keeps a close eye on the rankings. A lot of big-time players still on the board for Alabama. Package deal potentially in play for the Tide. What's the latest on that right now, Chad?
Yeah, I love this class already for Alabama. Obviously, sits number one for a reason, many reasons, with the Caleb Downs and Keon Keeley's, Caden Proctor's. List goes on. But it's only, in my opinion, going to get better, I think, in the end. I think they've been sitting pretty for James Smith and Quay Russaw for some time. They're obviously the package deal. And I love what they've done. I mean, they've said from the beginning, we're going to play together. We're going to take visits together. And the one little hiccup happened this past weekend. James Smith goes to Auburn. Quay Russaw does not. There then became some chatter. Could they end up going separate ways? Based on what I've put together the last couple of days, I do like the pair to stay together, sign together, and likely end up at Alabama. I've had predictions in for both and really been shaping the narrative for a few months that Bama was the team to beat, and I still feel that way, and we should know for certain here in just a couple hours.
And Bama's still with the number one class, Josh. I mean, they're still rolling. You look at those names on the screen: Caleb Downs, Keon Keeley, Justice Haynes, Eli Holstein, who they actually took a commitment from while Arch Manning was still on the board. I mean, he was a guy they were in the hunt for, made it pretty clear to Arch Manning, hey, we're taking two quarterbacks, Eli Holstein, one of them.
They believe in him.
They believe in him, man. So the Tide are continuing to roll. What does this say about Nick Saban and the future of Alabama? Like business as usual, or what's the deal here for Alabama?
This is a top-heavy class. This is a middle-heavy class. This is a bottom-heavy class. Every piece of this class, they got heavy hitters. I mean, you look at the middle of their commitment list, you got guys like Richard Young out of the state of Florida, who many considered the top back in the state for a while. You got Tony Mitchell, who they saved from Auburn, almost flipping Alabama pulling out all the stops to keep him committed. And then you got Malik Benson. Alabama needs wide receivers. What do? They go out to the JUCO level and grab the #1 prospect in junior college, Malik Benson, to hopefully come in and play right away at the wide receiver level. We know, watching Alabama last year, they need some pass catchers. They need some playmakers. They go get Malik Benson. They go get Caden Proctor. They go get.
And the whole conversation around the transfer portal was, okay, well, when Alabama, has to keep their roster together,
right,
and then they have to keep guys with options on their team, it's going to hurt Bama, right? Wrong. Actually, people are wanting to go and play for Nick Saban. They want to go get developed and play in the NFL. It's the same thing on the recruiting trail as Alabama. Still the undisputed heavyweight champ right now on the recruiting trail, the #1 class in the country. See the rankings up on your screen there. Those will change, we promise, but Alabama at 2, Alabama at 1, Georgia at 2, Miami in the 3 spot,
3.
Ohio State at 4, Texas at 5, Oregon at the 6 spot. Not done yet. LSU at 7, Notre Dame in the 8 spot, Oklahoma at 9, the Florida Gators hanging on to a top 10 class, but Alabama, Tide rolling, Josh.
Tide are rolling. Tide are not just rolling, but they are rolling away from the competition here. Georgia putting together a heck of a class, not even in the realm of taking down Alabama for the #1 class. So Alabama is going to do what Alabama does, and that's finish strong. We've seen a heck of a finish just last night. 5-star offensive tackle Caden Proctor makes it official. Now, we thought this was going to be some signing day drama, but Caden Proctor was so excited to sign with Bama. He announced it a day earlier. Last night, Caden Proctor flips his commitment from Iowa to Alabama, and that was just the cherry on top, because when you can pull a 5-star offensive tackle that's not only out of the state of Iowa, but committed to Iowa, man, you are recruiting at a high level.
I have to imagine just being able to sit down with Nick Saban, see the jewelry, hear about the plan to be developed. And one thing he talks about a lot is you just need one good year at Bama to achieve all your goals at the next level. I mean, he says that. You don't need to play here as a freshman. You don't need to play here first day on campus. If you will just be patient, trust our process, and stick to what we're telling you to do, you're going to be fine.
I mean, you have college scouts coming out to nearly every practice at Alabama. So just because you don't play doesn't mean that you're not going to be on the radar of some of these NFL teams. They could just be, they could have you on their radar just waiting for you to step on the field and prove what they've already seen in practice, which is you're a heck of a player. And now you're right. You're one and done. You play one full season on the field at Alabama and you have a great year, you can go pro. Depth chart doesn't matter when you're winning national titles.
It's just the way it goes, man. Jamison Williams, another guy who was one and done at Alabama, came from Ohio State. The Buckeyes continuing to do what Ohio State does, and Ryan Day and company continuing to recruit well. Now, for them, I think the story is kind of the same as it's always been. It's about building to beat Michigan. And they continue to have phenomenal players at the skill position with Brian Hartline. I mean, you look at that list.
The rich get richer at that position, huh? Brandon Inniss out of South Florida, Carnell Tate out of IMG, Noah Rogers, Jelani Thurman. Jelani Thurman's a dynamic tight end. I really like him. I know Chad's seen a lot of him there in Georgia. But the Buckeyes clearly needed some playmakers, and they got them in this class. Love what they're doing. They didn't really finish the way that they wanted to. I know most of that was down the stretch with defensive lineman Mateo Ua-galele and also Damon Wilson. Damon Wilson hasn't announced his decision yet, but at one time, Ohio State was heavily trending in favor of the 5-star from Venice, Florida. But now it looks like the Georgia Bulldogs have a better shot to sign him. We'll find out here in about an hour or two on Damon Wilson.
Yeah, and Ohio State, I mean, the Damon Wilson commitment would be unbelievable if they could be able to land a player of his caliber and have someone on the edge to wreak havoc, because we said it earlier in the program, Ohio State, when they're humming, when they're that team that's winning the Big Ten title and when they're competing for national championships, they've got somebody on the edge that's just a game breaker. They have the Chase Young or the Joey Bosa's. So far, they've made it a point in the trenches in this recruiting class. 7 guys either on the offensive or defensive side of the football, or excuse me, offensive or defensive side of the line of scrimmage.
Right.
How much of a point of emphasis is that for them going forward, especially given what happened the last 2 years against Michigan?
Yeah, and like you said, it's kind of the recipe for success at Ohio State. You got to have a dominant pass rusher coming off the edge. You got to have some playmakers. Now, Ohio State is figuring back out on offense. They've struggled at times, but with the infusion of talent that they're bringing in. Now, I know they lose Mark Fletcher. He decommits about 6 weeks ago, signing with Miami, but Ohio State's wide receiver group is it's close to one of the best groups in the country this year. So once again, Brian Hartline bringing in a top-tier wide receiver group that kind of puts the icing on the cake for Ohio State this year.
And Brian Hartline, one of our coaches of the year here at On3.
Absolutely.
A guy who just acquires top talent, pass catchers that are going to make plays on Saturdays. And I would imagine, pitches to them, hey, come make plays here on Saturdays. I promise you can go make plays on Sunday. Look at Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Michael Thomas. Like, you just go down the list here of great Buckeyes.
I celebrate his whole catalog.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
It is. It's really unbelievable the amount of talent that wants to go and is lining up to play for Brian Hartline in Ohio State, because there was a lot of teams coming after Brandon Inniss. There was a lot of teams coming after Carnell Tate. I mean, at their peak, Tennessee was making a serious run at Carnell Tate. They got him on campus, weren't able to flip him. Brandon Inniss flipped from Oklahoma to Ohio State after the Lincoln Riley departure to Oklahoma. So Brandon Inniss, there was whispers throughout that, hey, Inniss isn't going to sign with Ohio State. It's not going to last all the way down the stretch. He might flip to one of the in-state Florida schools. He might flip to, there's lots of rumors, but in the end, he never wavered. Brandon Inniss had faith in Brian Hartline, and you can understand why. The amount of talent that is coming out of Columbus, Ohio at the wide receiver position is nearly unmatched right now.
It's unbelievable.
By any other team in America.
It's absolutely unbelievable. And one big reason for those pass catchers wanting to come play in Columbus, quarterback position.
Yeah.
Consistently, year in and year out, there is a dog at the QB spot for the Buckeyes. Chad Simmons, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Lincoln Kienholz out of South Dakota is going to be the next man up there for Ohio State, or at least from this class. How impactful is a get like that, especially on the heels of a one Dylan Raiola from the 2024 class deciding he's going to open his recruitment back up?
Yeah, I mean, obviously went from, Brock Glenn, obviously now to Lincoln Kienholz. And I think you can't forget about, they signed the number one player in the On300 last year in Devin Brown from Utah, one-time USC commit. They went in there late, flipped him. So their quarterback room, you talk about the receiver room being strong, and I love those guys. And they're all different too, man, with Brandon Inniss being, I think, very college-ready, Tate being explosive, Noah Rogers having the size, Bryson Rogers, I think a mix of all three of those guys. So Brian Hartline keeps turning them out, but Ryan Day and Corey Dennis in the quarterback room, not so shabby either. So I think that was critical for them to get a quarterback in this class. You got to basically sign one every class, especially now with the portal and guys opting out within a year to 2 years. So I think that was critical to land Lincoln Kienholz in this class.
Absolutely. No, I mean, getting a guy who is excited to go play at Ohio State, who wants to move towards competition, like you said so articulately at the beginning of the show, Josh. I think that's a big get, and excited to see what he ends up doing, because that's only going to continue to attract talent for Ohio State. Now, shifting gears here a little bit, Ohio State, the goal for them every single year is beat the team up north, beat Michigan. They're 0 for 2 in their last 2 tries. And so on the recruiting trail, you would think, okay, well, Michigan must be kicking their tail on the recruiting trail, too. They must have a top 5 class.
Right,
They
you
must
would
be
think,
crushing
hey.
it. Started the day at 21.
Yeah.
Did the Wolverines. Is this
They've
about
moved up to 20 since then.
Okay, making moves on the Wolverines. Is this for you about development for why they're able to be so successful, or why are they recruiting better, and why are they getting the results they are that are positive on the field?
I think a little of it had to do last year, last year you could blame this on Jim Harbaugh's flirtation with the NFL. This year, I see a lot of the blame. I talked to E.J. Holland, who runs our On3 Michigan site, and he does a great job over there. And, he talks about this a lot on the site. Michigan's NIL right now is just not organized and set up to compete with some of these other programs just in the Big Ten, let alone in the SEC and elsewhere. But I'm not worried about Michigan because results matter, and right now, Jim Harbaugh has this thing humming, unlike he has really at any other point during his tenure at Michigan, and it seems like he knows he has the formula. I think that recruiting will come along. It's not to say that they're ignoring recruiting. I mean, their top commitment, Collins Etchapong, decommitted about 3 weeks ago and flipped to Miami, which, what have we been saying about Miami? They're not doing it on the field, but they are doing it in the NIL space. So it goes to show you that sometimes results on the field can't even trump some of these NIL opportunities that are being presented to these athletes. And I think Michigan has suffered a little bit from this. 2 completely separate recruiting strategies when it comes to how Ohio State is operating and how Michigan is operating. They're both in the same conference. I feel like this is almost like a little mini science experiment that we're watching take place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because honestly, we don't know how it's going to shape out. Like, we think that the best team is going to rise up with the best recruiting rankings, but Michigan is showing that despite our recruiting, we're still kicking your butt on the recruiting trail, Ohio State. So what does it matter where we recruit? But ultimately, I do think it matters, and they're going to try to recruit better. I mean, they held on to Enow Etta. There was rumors that Enow Etta, who was also friends with Collins Etchampong, was also going to flip to Miami.
Wow, okay.
So they were able to hold on to Enow Etta today. I think that is a positive if you're looking at what's going on with Michigan recruiting. But I want to see them finish strong. Dylan Harbour still out there. Something in me tells me that Michigan is going to land the 5-star athlete, but he doesn't decide till February.
Yep.
So as of today, you know, Michigan kind of quietly creeping to the finish line.
Chad, I want to ask you something about this as well after I get Josh's thoughts on this, but how much would that elevate Michigan's recruiting class, just from a ranking standpoint, if you land a guy like Nicholas Harbour? Just from a ranking standpoint, I would imagine you shoot up the charts, Josh, would you not?
I think it would, because if you look around the Michigan, when they sit at 20, there's not many teams with a 5-star recruit committed to them. I think not even within, you know, well, Florida State does. They have one at 19,
Sure.
but we've already talked about Florida State's struggles on the recruiting trail. So I think if Michigan lands Nicholas Harbour, you're going to be looking at a much more respectable, maybe a top 15-ish class, which is much more respectable for a team that's in the playoffs right now.
Absolutely, and it's a thing where the success on the field maybe starts to kickstart more on the recruiting trail.
Your 24 class.
24 class,
Yeah.
We'll see how that shakes out. Chad, riffing on that, Nicholas Harbour, a big fish, going to sign in February. In your mind, where does Michigan stand in his whole recruitment?
No, I agree with Josh. I mean, they're definitely up there. Am I ready to proclaim them as the favorite? I mean, I think they're right there. I think it's tighter than people think with especially Maryland, who just flipped Neo Avery, by the way, from Ole Miss to keep him home, a good council talent up there in the Baltimore area. And Maryland's in this. His sister went there. You know, his mother went there. Now, he has family in Michigan, and his mom has come out on the phone and just told me she loves the combination of academics and athletics at Michigan, the culture, the balance there. I mean, academics are very important to that family, and obviously it'll be Nick's decision in the end, but that family will have their input as well. I think Michigan is right there. You know, if Josh wants to call them the favorite, I definitely wouldn't argue that. I think they're right there. E.J. Holland, very connected there at the Wolverine for us as well at On 3. But I do like Michigan, Maryland, and keep an eye on South Carolina as well. And let's see if he even takes other visits. You know, I think he could get back to Michigan, could get back to South Carolina, but Michigan is very much a threat. And if someone wants to label them as the front runner, I wouldn't argue that.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm labeling them as the front runner. I'm just saying I have a gut feeling. But we've been on air for 3 hours, and I could just be hungry at this point, so who knows?
I think you're backtracking, Josh. Come on, man. Stand up to it. You made the statement.
Yeah.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Well, no, I think what you said is absolutely on the money. Not a lot you can't do with a Michigan degree. Pretty nice piece of paper to have. Let's move gears here a little bit to the Clemson Tigers.
Okay.
Because they do things differently over there in Clemson, South Carolina. And
what things do they do differently?
Yeah, I mean, they used to not even take visits to a certain period of the year. They don't really go in the transfer portal. They kind of operate at a different tempo than everybody else does. And they're fine with that. That's Dabo's way of doing things. But, Josh, I want to get your thoughts on this because the comp for me, and it sounds funny, Clemson to me is like the Chick-fil-A of the college football world. Chick-fil-A, closed on Sunday, different level of service, and you're okay with them being closed on Sunday because Chick-fil-A puts out the best product there is.
Okay.
Arguably. Same thing with Clemson. We've been okay with them not hitting the portal. We've been okay with how they do the visit schedule because they're consistently one of those teams that's
We've been okay with it. Yeah.
We've been cool with it.
Yeah, we've been okay with it. Clemson does it their way.
Now you're starting to see them slide a little bit. Started at the top 10. No longer in the top 10 is Clemson. Where does Clemson stand as a program on the recruiting trail as it relates to that?
It's kind of like if you show up to Chick-fil-A on Monday and it's dirty and disorganized, you're like, well, why are you closed on Sunday? So now that we see Clemson's offense slipping a little bit, we see some of these players, especially at the quarterback position, maybe not panning out. There's some indecisiveness. I think at this point, I am a little bit worried about Clemson's process. In years past, I think we've given them a pass because of the results. I really do like Clemson's class this year, though, especially on the defensive line. You got Peter Woods, you got Tamarian Parker, Stephylan Green, some really talented players on the defensive line, and that's quietly where it starts for Clemson.
Yep.
I know their offense gets a lot of talk. I know their quarterback play gets a lot of talk. But really, Clemson has had a dominant defensive line in their years of competing for a national championship. And I think bringing in guys like Peter Woods and Green and Vic Burley.
Yeah.
How can I forget about Vic Burley? Love him out of South Georgia. He's a dog. So I like Clemson's class. But I do think, like you're saying, it's time to adapt.
Yeah.
And it's time to hit the portal. And it's time to find a few key pieces. I'm not saying they need to revamp their offense. I don't think they need to take double digits in the portal, but I could see them adding one or two pieces that could really improve their team.
And I respect the fact they want to protect culture, because I think that's what makes Clemson
Sure.
Clemson. And Dabo has made no, arguments about who Clemson is as a program. But for Clemson, I think there's a way to still maintain that culture, but be, what's the right word? Be surgical in the portal.
Yeah.
Make sure you just get a couple pieces, like you said, to revamp the program.
Yeah, you don't want to bring in it. You're not making your program into a mercenary program
Yep.
where you're overhauling the roster. But hey, maybe a Power 5 wide receiver could help you out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a linebacker. There's a few pieces there I could see that could really improve Clemson's roster.
But still did well in the recruiting trail this year, getting
Yep.
a top 10 quarterback, 4-star. Chris Vizina is going to help them out. You would imagine he sits behind a guy, Cade Klubnik, for a little
Yeah.
bit. How big a get is that for Clemson to have the quarterback to go with some of the trenches they added?
You feel better, especially with DJU transferring out. You want to get a little bit more depth. I think that Clemson bringing in a quarterback this year was mightily important, even though you have Cade Klubnik, who I love coming out of high school. He's a real gunslinger. I think Clemson has a very exciting quarterback coming up, but we'll see what happens. I like the competition that they're bringing in. Clemson's class overall going to probably finish outside the top 10, but very, very solid at key positions.
Just doing things Dabo's way. Well, we got a little more breaking news for you. 4-star athlete Micah Tease has given his pledge to the Texas A&M Aggies. Chad, I want to throw it over to you here whenever we get you for a second. Micah Tease deciding he wants to go with Jimbo, go to College Station, be a part of what they're doing down there. Is this surprising to you at all? Did you see this coming? What's the impact of this commitment for the Aggies?
No real surprise. One-time Arkansas commit, backed off that. A&M's been trending since, JD, so no real surprise. And again, though, but a big, 4-star kid, athlete, versatile guy. So obviously A&M's trying to grab some late momentum, and I think ultimately they're trying to put all their effort into landing and keeping David Hicks in this class right now. But Micah Tease is a good addition for sure.
No, without a doubt. I mean, for A&M, they had the #1 class a season ago, and then we get into this year and not necessarily had the success on the field that would be attractive.
Yeah.
There are some exits in the portal, but they add a big-time player in Micah Tease, again, a 4-star athlete that will help kind of rebuild the infrastructure, if that's the right word, to use at A&M and kind of help revamp that roster as they have lost some guys to the portal. But a big-time get for A&M. They were at the number 15 class to start the day. Where do you feel like A&M stands right now? It's weird to contrast. They had the #1 class last year, not even in the top 10 right now, Josh.
Well, it's not exactly a shocker. I mean, the season that they had, the way that it went down for Texas A&M, for them to salvage the class and bring in some huge pieces, especially landing some #1 players at their position like a David Hicks, if they can hold on to them, I think it would be a massive haul. A great start for Jimbo Fisher, but he's going to have to get active in the portal because you hit on it. They lost almost 24 players to the transfer portal, and they're only going to sign, I think they only have right now they have about 15, 18 players committed to them. So there's some discrepancy where they're going to have to completely fill out this roster, and I think they're going to hit the portal hard. We just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I mean, they coming into the day, we're the #6 class in the SEC. I mean, to be #1 in the country a season ago and not even be in the top 5 of the conference today on signing day, it's a little bit disappointing for Jimbo.
It's kind of weird, but having seen the season that they had, it's kind of expected. It correlates. I mean, they loaded up last year. You saw a lot of the high-profile freshmen even taking a look at the portal.
Yep.
I mean, now A&M has to hit the portal hard after their players hit the portal hard.
Yeah, you have to be able to revitalize what you lost via the portal. You have to make sure you still have what you need on that roster to be successful, because if the SEC is one thing, it's unforgiving. I mean,
Right.
it's not going to allow you to, get by with a little bit less talent than the next team over, because everybody's good, everybody's physical, everybody's mean and nasty in the trenches, so you better make sure you bring the juice. And so the recruiting trail being a little bit less exciting than it was a season ago for Aggie fans, but still have a lot to, I think, market if you're Texas A&M and Jimmy Fisher.
They're playing the game, keeping up with the Sabans.
Keeping up with the Sabans and the Smarts, man, a job that I do not envy in the slightest. It's a very, very difficult one to do in the Southeastern Conference. Chad, I want to throw it back to you here in just a second. It sounds like we're about to get some commitments here from Quay Rousseau and James Smith.
The big one.
How close is that? What's the latest as we approach a decision from them?
Yeah, they were set to go, right around this time, so it should be, here shortly, and really nothing. I haven't heard anything today that's changed my opinion of Bama being the favorite. So again, they've taken their last visits, they took them all together. I think they stayed together from Carver, Montgomery, Alabama, and likely end up together in Tuscaloosa. I mean, all signs point to, again, the rich getting richer and Bama being Bama and Nick Saban winning for two of the top players in the country.
It's over.
As it came out of your mouth, Chad.
It's over. So, yeah, huge. I mean, just two more big additions to the University of Alabama, literally an elite D tackle, inside guy with James Smith, and then an elite edge rush guy in Quay Rousseau. I think Auburn was always kind of the biggest threat, being the in-state school. At one time, Quay himself liked Georgia, maybe James liked more Florida, Ohio State, but when they came together, which they always were, the common team was Alabama, and they both feel they can make them great together in Tuscaloosa.
Wow.
Absolutely huge. Like the lower third says, Josh, Bama is gonna Bama. How about that? You surprised at all by this?
What a great way to start and end the show.
Golly.
With Bama 5 stars. They go from 4 5 stars to 6 5 stars on their commit list right now, and they're not done. Deuce Robinson's still on the board for them. We'll see if they can have some late action. But yeah, Alabama just filling out all the needs. This is the reason why we said the battle for 1 and 2 just wasn't going to take place today. There really is no battle. Those 2 spots are locked in. Alabama doing what they do, stacking the 5 stars, and what a way to end the show today with a commitment from Quay Rousseau and James Smith. There's so much talk throughout the cycle of whether or not they would be a package deal. There was a belief that maybe we could split them up, maybe we can all get them together. Florida made a run, Auburn really made a run. But in the end, Alabama does what Alabama does, and they land the duo from Carver.
Absolutely huge. Chad, I want to get you out of here with this. Thank you for making the time to be here. You're all over the map, man, covering recruiting like nobody else in the country. Again, Director of Recruiting for On3, Chad Simmons, freshest man in the game with some Jordan 3s as well today, elephant print. Give us some insight as to what we can expect now for the February signing period. Still some big fish that are out there. What are some of the storylines you're tracking as we get close to the next signing day?
Yeah, I think we hit on both. I think the majority come off the board this week. Again, we still have some guys out there with Cormani, obviously David Hicks, with Justice Jordan Hall tomorrow, Desmond Ricks tomorrow. I think that the big ones that go into the second signing period will be, obviously Nick Carver and then Deuce Robinson. I think a running back that kind of saw his stock rise this fall, Jamarian Wilcox from Georgia, Kentucky's involved, Clemson's involved, Ohio State's involved. He's decided to wait until February as well. We'll see if anybody else decides to hold off. But right now, I would say it's going to be pretty slim. But when talking about the slim numbers, the talent's super high with guys like Deuce and Nick leading the way.
Couple of big dogs, couple of big-time players that are still out there just waiting to find a home, and a couple of programs that I'm sure would gladly welcome their services, gladly welcome their signature. Josh, before we get off air, who needs to gain ground when it comes to the February signing day?
Well, I think you look at Notre Dame. What can they finish with? Michigan. Can we get you out of the 30s? That's not respectable for a team that's competing for the playoffs. We've already seen Oregon make their march to the top 5. That's been really exciting. And we'll see if Clemson and UF can hang out at the bottom of that top 10. Right now, Clemson outside the top 10. Right now, the Gators are just barely hanging on to that 10 spot. So there could be some more action. We'll see what happens. Here's some of the top uncommitted prospects right now. But they've already come off the board except for Nicholas Harbor and Damon Wilson. Damon Wilson set to decide, I think, in about an hour, so we should have some clarity there. And then also, what happens with David Hicks?
Yeah.
I mean, does David Hicks and Cormani McClain announce Friday? Or maybe they both take it into January? There's just so much uncertainty still left out there.
So much uncertainty, so much still left to be decided on the recruiting trail. But for everybody here at the On3 headquarters in Nashville, Tennessee, at the studio, Josh Newberg, national recruiting analyst for On3, Chad Simmons holding it down in the booth, bringing inside scoop, bringing intel, bringing analysis. So glad to have him along for the ride. Nick Brake. Folks, I don't know if you totally can comprehend how much Nick Brake is doing behind the scenes.
what he's been
to
doing.
put on a show like this, usually you have 3 to 4 people, you have a control room, you have a graphics team, you have so much extra stuff. Nick Brake's making it all spin with just a one-man show and a couple of monitors. So Nick Brake making everything that you see happen here. Appreciate all that he's done for this.
And a big shout out to all of our On3 fan sites.
Yep.
You guys, now trust me, this is my first year hosting it from a national level. I'm tired, I'm exhausted, but I'll tell you what, I'm not nearly as tired as I was running a fan site for 12 years. So shout out to all you guys. You are the real heroes here. On3 fan sites doing a phenomenal job today.
Absolutely, without a doubt. So for everybody here at On3, we appreciate you. Subscribe if you haven't. Like the video if you haven't already. There is more to come on the recruiting trail. What do you say, Josh? Do this again here soon. Happy signing day. We'll see y'all soon.
First of many.